I've always wanted to do that. Thank you, everybody. If we can move on then to agenda item 12, and I call upon Councillor Chris Barnfather to introduce the report and move the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The report is before you at agenda item at number 12, page 63 of your papers. It's a self-explanatory paper. Obviously, it names the majority group's nominations for chairman and vice chairman of the committees that we are establishing today, and obviously outlines other bodies to which we send representatives from this authority. And it also, on Appendix A, shows the allocation of committee seats. And I hope that the allocation of committee seats, particularly to the non-aligned members, reflects this administration's inclusive approach. We have attempted to give non-aligned members who perhaps have felt marginalised in the past in some of the allocation of seats that they have had, we've attempted to harness their talents and put them on committees which are committees with a real bite and decision-making capabilities. I'd like to thank the monitoring officer while I'm moving this, Chairman, for the tremendous support that she's given me as a new business manager on this administration, and for the members of her team who have worked tirelessly over the last 2 weeks to produce the documentation and the results that you have before you today. So I formally move the paper. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. And can I call upon Councillor Bruce Lawton to second the motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. Any members indicated they wish to speak? Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say thank you to Chris Barnfather and the leadership of the majority group, purely and simply because I have been usually allocated a seat of wherever the previous leader wanted to put me. And so I appreciate the fact that I've been given 2 seats, and I've also appreciated that I was given the choice. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Anyone else? No? Then can I ask the mover if he wants to say anything further?
I appreciate the comments from Councillor Dobson, Chairman, but nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, can we put the motion to the vote? All in favour? Anyone against? No, that's unanimous then. We move on then to agenda item 13A, which is questions to the Nottinghamshire and City Nottingham Fire Authority, and there are none received. So we move on then to 13B, which is questions to committee. And I just remind everyone it's set out in the Constitution. There's a maximum of 60 minutes and to allow for questions to committee chairman, after which any remaining questions will have a written response. I'd also like to remind members that following the change in the Constitution, there will only be one supplementary question, which must be from the member who asked the original question. And the supplementary question should be on the same matter and should be in the form of a question, not a statement. There will be no adjournment debates. And the first question I have on my list is from Councillor Kate Fole.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, on behalf of the Labour Group, I'd like to congratulate you again on your election to the Mansfield North Division and to your new role as a leader of Nottinghamshire County Council. Given your existing responsibilities as MP for Mansfield, what assurance can you provide of your ability to serve all of Nottinghamshire's residents fairly and equitably over the next 4 years?
Councillor Reddy.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fole, for giving me a chance to talk about it again. I think we've discussed this a lot in the media over the last few weeks and tried to put across the potential benefits. I imagine the journalists in the corner at the back could probably tell you the answer as clearly as I could at this stage. So I do think we've explained this quite openly and quite publicly. I think there are opportunities in tying together these roles for us to build on both local and national priorities, for us to be able to go and paint a case both for my residents in Mansfield and for the whole county in Westminster. And we've seen already examples of those things tying together. To answer your point directly, I think around the challenge of representing Mansfield and working for the whole county. I don't think that's unusual in that every single one of us and every leader of a council represents a small area, a division within the whole. And so I don't think that's a unique situation or anything new, to be honest. I have clearly a challenge of dividing my time, but there is a lot of crossover between the two roles. A lot of the issues, macroeconomic issues for us as a county and East Midlands, are things that I pick up and work on in both of my roles, for example. And I think we've already seen, and colleagues who've been involved in discussions and briefings over the last few weeks will have already seen some of the benefits that we can bring to people of Nottinghamshire by tying these two things together. I know that my group will hold me to account on delivering on that representation. I know that this council will as well, and we will do our best to deliver on that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Fole?
I do, thank you. Okay, well, thank you for that. And yes, I have seen some of your media comments on this one. But with respect, I think you are in a unique position. You actually have 3 jobs. One looking after the residents in your division, another leading Notts County Council and overseeing the services to the whole of Nottinghamshire, and another as MP for the whole of Mansfield. That's 3 big jobs. I'm not sure anybody else has quite that kind of responsibility. And in the interest of equal opportunities, I'm going to ask you that a question that you would certainly be asked if you were a woman. If you're a woman taking on all these responsibilities, you would certainly be asked, how are you going to be a good parent and role model for your children on top of all those responsibilities? And how are you going to find the energy and the passion and be able to deliver a vision for Nottinghamshire with all these responsibilities and do it well? Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a shame that a woman would be asked that, never mind anybody else, though I recognise the point that she's made. Truth be told, I think, although there are 3 roles, I don't think they're particularly distinct or unique. There is a lot of crossover between the 3 of them. Much of what crosses my desk as a Member of Parliament is in fact a county council related issue. Much of what has already come into my inbox as a councillor and the leader of the council is actually parliamentary issues. There is a great deal of crossover, as I've said, and a lot of the community engagement that I will, of course, be doing as the councillor for Mansfield North are things that I already have been doing as a Member of Parliament. So I don't think it's true to say that these are 3 unique and separate roles. The example that I've used in terms of time has been one of a government minister who is both a Member of Parliament and a minister in government. Matt Hancock runs a £300 billion government department alongside his work as a constituency MP. I imagine he is busier than I am and has a young family as well. So I'm sure that we can balance those responsibilities.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Can we move on then to Councillor Mike Pringle?
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations to you and Vice Chair on your newly selected positions. My questions to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Bradley. One of the ongoing concerns for our residents when changes to Nottinghamshire County Council services have been proposed is a lack of meaningful engagement and adequate consultation with those affected. Can the Leader outline his vision for inclusive consultation ahead of any policy or service changes which may come under his new administration?
Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for your question, which, again, is a good opportunity for me to talk about some of the proactive work we've been doing already in the first few weeks of our administration to try and get closer to communities, because one of the things I certainly feel and recognise is that perhaps the County Council hasn't always been seen to be engaged directly with local communities in the way that districts sometimes have. For example, that's something we want to change to help and engage with our residents over the services that are important to them, and that engagement as part of their democratic rights is something they rightly expect from us. So as we come out of the challenges of coronavirus, as we look at our key priorities over the summer, we intend to launch a huge consultation, one of the biggest the Council has ever done, over the course of the summer, to put together our council plan and long-term priorities, which will be overseen by Councillor Lawson. And we want to invest some significant time and energy in having those conversations about the way forward. It'll be available for everyone. It will work alongside engagement with elected representatives here, and we're looking at all sorts of different methods as to how we might do this, both digital, face-to-face, and opportunities to go out there and speak to our communities. I've asked officers to explore how we can engage more consistently with people on issues that matter to them. It's early days as we try and do that, whether that is online, whether it's forums that we can pull together. We now have a huge database of people who have contacted us to volunteer over the course of the last year, 18 months, and people who are clearly engaged with our communities and issues that we can now talk to. So there are opportunities for us to go and do that, and I'm confident that we'll be able to engage effectively with residents.
You have a supplementary?
Please, Chairman, if I can, and I welcome the response from Councillor Bradley. We recognise in the past we've received some really poor responses and acted upon them as being consultation figures that we should act upon. In the case that that does happen, and we recognise that the response is not consistent with actually representing people, are we in a position then, with what he says, I'm assuming so, to look outside of the initial consultation and widen that effect and drive those taken on board the consultation outside of the initial remit to make sure we can act in response to a wider selection of responses that come back to us at all?
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Bradley?
Thank you for that. I think it's important we balance the two. Elected representatives will have their views of things that happen in their divisions, as will residents, and we will try to engage with both, as well as officers and staff of the council, and get a wide range of views. You'll know, as an elected representative, Mike, that it can sometimes be impossible to balance the views of all of the residents who you represent, and in your now very marginal seat, you will have a diverse range of people who look to you to represent them with differing, totally opposite opinions, and you can't possibly represent both. So that is a challenge, one that I recognise, but we look to take on and to reach out to as many people with as diverse a range of views as we can, and to feed that into the delivery of services as we go forward. And we hope that we can take those services closer to communities as a result.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I move on then to Councillor Penny Gowland.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've taken that out of order.
Yeah.
It's Jim Creamer first. Sorry, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again, and congratulations on your position, and Councillor Jackson's as well. I hope you enjoy the next year. The question to the Chairman of the Finance Committee. The recent Queen's speech outlined this government's plans for the upcoming year, yet failed to mention any social care funding reforms. How does the Chair of Finance see this impacting on the ability of Nottingham County Council to continue providing the same high-quality services across adult social care?
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Richard Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And first of all, my congratulations to you on your elevation, and to Roger on becoming your deputy. And I can personally attest to the support that Councillor Jackson gives as a deputy chairman, as a vice chairman to me. So can I thank Councillor Creamer for his question? And Councillor Creamer will know that in the Queen's speech on the 11th of May, there was a promise that proposals on social care reform will be brought forward. On the 19th of May, just a week after the Queen's speech, in reply to a question put directly by the council leader, Councillor Ben Bradley, in his other capacity as the Member of Parliament, the Minister for Health, Ed Arger, stated that, I'll quote, "The Prime Minister and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, have been absolutely clear in their determination that we will bring forward our proposals to reform social care this year, so that everyone receives the dignified care that they deserve within a system that is sustainable." So, Chairman, it's incorrect to say that the Queen's speech did not mention social care reform. And in fact, we have a commitment that they will come forward this year. Therefore, we should await the announcement and the details within it in order to determine exactly what the impact will be on social care services in Nottinghamshire. And I would add that we are the best placed local authority in the country now, through our leader, to make sure that we lobby and get the best for this county and for the people that rely on adult social care services from us, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Creamer, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have the Queen's speech in front of me, and there's no actual direct mention of that answer. But the actual question, the supplementary, is to do with more specifically to the County Council. Could you comment on the impact of funding uncertainty, still uncertainty, the care services which have been severely impacted throughout the lockdown? There's concern that some of the daycare centres in particular will never reopen, which has a tremendous stressful impact on parents and carers, etc., who will wish to be reassured about our daycare centres. In the future, can you actually guarantee or provide some assurance that they will be opening and that they will be looked after properly? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just for absolute clarity, let me just repeat the statement in the Queen's speech which promised that proposals on social care reform will be brought forward. So it is incorrect, as I said before, to say that it wasn't mentioned in the Queen's speech. It certainly was. And as I said previously, we've got assurances that it will be brought forward this year. In terms of the delay, I think we would all have liked to have seen more detailed proposals, but I think it's perfectly understandable in the context of the last 15 months and with everything else that's happening in government, with the fact that well over £300 billion so far has been put in to fighting the coronavirus pandemic by government, that there wasn't the bandwidth to come up with real meaningful proposals in adult social care. As we're moving into a different period now, I think it's right, and I think it is a priority, and it's been made very clear in the Queen's speech that it's a priority, and I'm sure we will see something meaningful come forward. As for exactly how adult social care services will be managed in the future, and I'm glad in his question, the original question that Councillor Creamer noted that we do provide high quality services across adult social care. I think my colleague, the new chairman of the Adult Social Care Committee, will have plenty to say about that in the future and how the shape of those will work. I can talk about the funding, and as we did in the budget just back in February, we will make sure that the funding is in place to deliver all the services that need to be delivered for people right across the county. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Sorry, Councillor Gowland, it is your turn now.
Thank you very much. So I have a question for the Chair of the Transport and Environment Committee. It is very encouraging to finally see the issue of climate change has been given the necessary weight by this authority. Will this enthusiasm extend to agreeing to review existing recycling contract in order to streamline and simplify arrangements to improve recycling rates across the county? Thank you.
Councillor Neil Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. What a great question. I say that because it's almost as though I planted the question with Councillor Garland. Or alternatively, she's been listening in on my conversations with officers over the last few weeks. Whichever it is, the answer to the question is yes. I'm pleased that this council is making carbon reduction a priority. More of that later on in the agenda. This council has taken the issue of climate change very seriously for many years and introduced a range of green initiatives over the last 4 years. Not only agreeing to do it, but I've already asked officers, I'm already discussing with officers to actually initiate it. It's now been 15 years since the start of the contract. Perceptions, public opinion and demands and modern methods have changed since the start of the contract. They weren't known then. So now is the time to ask the question whether the contract is actually still fit for purpose. So I repeat, the answer is yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Gowland?
No, I'll take that as my first win. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Michelle Welsh.
Yes, question to the Chairman of Children and Young People's Committee. This government have placed significant emphasis on the development of family hubs, with the associated tagline of Growing Up Well. Could the Chair articulate how these will differ from the Sure Start centres that commenced under a Labour government?
Councillor Tracy Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I begin by congratulating you and Councillor Jackson on your new roles and by welcoming Councillor Welsh to the Chamber? Thank you for your question, Councillor Welsh. Children's Centre services have developed significantly in Nottinghamshire over recent years. Last year, they returned to the direct control of this local authority, having previously been commissioned from an external provider. Services are now targeted in particular at the parents of very young children considered most at risk of poor outcomes, using early, strong, evidence-based interventions. They are designed to reach out into communities rather than only being based in buildings that some families had previously struggled to access. I'm pleased to announce that the service has very recently received the UNICEF Gold Award for being baby-friendly, making it only the third local authority service to have achieved this honour. Whilst we already have well-developed models for early help and protection for school-aged children and those approaching adulthood, we are now examining potential models for the introduction of family hubs in Nottinghamshire. Family hubs offer an opportunity for public and voluntary sector services to become better coordinated at a local level, serving children right up until the point of adulthood. This is different from Sure Start, which was more firmly focused on preschool children and building-based universal services. Options for the Family Hub model are under consideration by a group that includes our strategic partners in health and the voluntary sector. This will dovetail with the work on early help, led through the strategies overseen by the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children Partnership and Best Start strategy. And I would just add, having been at the Safeguarding Children Partnership meeting earlier this week, that the refresh on that partnership document should be coming through to Children and Young People's Committee in the next cycle. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Chair. Thank you for your answer. In light of the government's tagline of growing up well and what you've spoken about with regards to targeting some of our children that are most risk of poor outcomes, the fact remains that hundreds of children have been born during this pandemic. And from personal experience and the fact that I run a group of over 170 mums across Nottinghamshire, the support for children, for babies and mothers has been virtually non-existent. And there's a lot of worries about babies' development during this pandemic due to the lack of support, their health and also mums' mental health wellbeing. So this is a plea as well as a question. I plea for Nottinghamshire County Council to do some targeted support for those mums that have had babies during pandemics with regards to their early years development, but also to support women with regard to their mental health as well. So it's a plea as well as a question. There are a lot of vulnerable women out there and a lot of babies that will need that extra support.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. I think the first thing is to acknowledge the difficulties that everyone has faced, all families have faced during the last 14 months of the pandemic. I do hear and understand the concerns that you're articulating for those new mums and new babies. I am assured that services, including targeted interventions in the home and with families, have continued through the pandemic in the best way that they could, given the national circumstances. And I would like to assure you that that work will continue as we reopen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Anne Callaghan.
I'd like to put a question to the Chair of Children and Young People's Committee. The Department for Education have recently agreed to 5 councils having their SEND deficits written off, a sum totalling some £100 million. Could the Chair of the Children and Young People update members on any plans or discussions to comprehensively evaluate the real SEND need in Nottinghamshire in order to ensure that as an authority we have sufficient funding from government to properly meet the needs of all our children and young people? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and I do hope that this doesn't mean I'm going to become this administration's Councillor Cotty. Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Callaghan, and I'd also like to welcome you to the Chamber. Nottinghamshire County Council provides detailed annual statistics to government each year on children with SEND, and we review these through our SEND Accountability Board. This, alongside our direct engagement with children, young people and families, informs the strategic action plan of that board. We estimate that there are some 11,000 children with disabilities and additional needs in Nottinghamshire, the majority of whom receive all of the support they need in a mainstream school or college. There are some 3,500 children and young adults aged 0 to 25 who have higher level needs and an education, health and care plan. Our priority is to understand the needs of this group and how we can most effectively provide support to them and their families. A detailed joint strategic needs assessment has been commissioned through the SEND Accountability Board and is expected to be completed in the next 6 to 12 months. This should help us to predict future requirements in far more detail. During the previous administration, the chairman of the Children and Young People's Committee, Councillor Philip Owen, and the current council leader, Councillor Bradley, in his capacity as MP for Mansfield, made strong representations to government regarding the higher needs block funding formula. This work included a personal meeting with Nadeem Zahawi and a Children and Families Minister at that time to lobby for extra resources. This was successful. The amount of SEND money available to the county has increased significantly by 39%. That's £25 million per annum between 2018 and the current financial year. As a result, we are not in the same position as some areas who have had to roll deficits forward over a number of years. Some of these areas are receiving additional help with those deficits, but there are requirements attached to this funding, including following a strict recovery plan. This is not without consequence, as they will be required to bring their spending back into line with available budgets swiftly. The high needs budget in Nottinghamshire remains a challenge, and we continue to press government for further funding. However, we are not carrying a deficit, and Ofsted and the CQC have inspected the local area provision for children with SEND and found services to be generally well delivered, with no need for written statements of action prescribing immediate improvements. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We move on then to agenda item 14. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm losing it. It's getting rather warm in here. Just a point. I know some of you have removed your jackets already, but it is rather warm in here. If gentlemen would prefer to remove their jackets as the temperature is rising, or ladies, if they have jackets on, then you don't need to wait for my permission. Just remove them and make yourselves more comfortable. You have a supplementary?
Yes. As a frontline practitioner, my daily experience as a frontline practitioner is there is a vast void between what we are told should be and is available, and the reality of that for families across the county. And I know from going to an EHCP plan for a child yesterday, only to be told there is no vacancies or no places in any specialist school in Nottinghamshire for a child with SEND who is not able to go to a mainstream school. So that was my question.
Councillor, could I ask you define your actual question, please? I'm finding difficulty in understanding what your question is. I don't know whether Councillor Taylor is happy to respond, but...
My actual question is, for families with children of SEND, there's not enough provision within the county to meet their needs or those of the family. And yesterday, going to an EHCP meeting for a child that needs to be removed from mainstream to attend a special school, to be told there is not a place in Nottinghamshire for that child to go.
Councillor, I don't want to be obtuse, but that is still not a question. If I can help, would you like to ask the chair of the committee what provision this council is going to make for SEND provision in the future?
Yes. So, sorry. So would the Children and Young People's Commissioner like to reply to that about, what's going to be done in the future for the deficit?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. It is always easier if there is a direct question in there. Obviously, I don't want to be answering the wrong one. Under the previous administration, we have increased provision across the county. We continue to assess need and to assess provision. I obviously can't comment on the specific case that you've raised. If you want to have a conversation with me beyond this meeting, then I'm happy to take that up with or on your behalf. So I'm more than happy to do that. But if you're asking me the very simplistic question, are we committed to increasing provision so that there is sufficient across this county, the short and simple answer is yes.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We now move on to agenda item 14, notice of motions. There are 4 motions, and I call upon Councillor Jason Zadrozny to put forward his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted to present this motion set down by myself and my new excellent colleague, Councillor Waters. Motion one is that. Is that? Is it? Now then, new kind of politics. This council welcomes comments made by the new leader of the council that the government have pulled the plug on unitary authorities. The council further notes the fervent opposition from borough and district council leaders to creating a super council or unitary authority that would be bigger than. Hello. Thank you. That would be bigger than Luxembourg, centrally run from West Bridgford. This council believes in localism and that decisions are best made as close to the communities that they impact. This council welcomes election leaflets issued by Conservative Party in the 2021 county council elections, asserting that there are no plans to scrap our borough or district councils. During successive COVID lockdowns, the strength of partnership and working between our borough and district councils, Nottinghamshire county councils, and other key partners was a major and widely recognised success in our multi-agency response to COVID. This council therefore commits to maintaining our current model of local government, and that the leader of Nottinghamshire County Council will write to the Right Honourable Robert Jenrick MP, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, making clear that this council has no intention of becoming a unitary authority, as we now concentrate on leading the local recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Chair, do you wish me to speak to it before it's seconded, or do you want it to be seconded first?
That is entirely up to you, Councillor Zadrozny. I'm not precious about it.
Well, I'll speak first then, Chair, and then Councillor Waters can second. So, Mr. Chairman, we spoke a lot this morning about working together, and you fiddled with it, and now it's. We spoke this morning a lot already about working together, and one of the key things that members were able to work together on last year was when leaders of all of the district and borough councils across Nottinghamshire, so Newark and Sherwood, Rushcliffe, Gedling, Bassetlaw, Broxtowe, Ashfield and Mansfield, and in fact Nottingham City as well, worked together in opposition to the scrapping of the district and borough councils. And we wrote a joint leader, which I, as leader of Ashfield District Council, co-signed with the 7 other council leaders, calling for Nottinghamshire County Council to shelve plans to create one big super council, one that would have been bigger than Luxembourg. The Conservatives came together with Labour at borough and district level, and the Ashfield Independents, and of course my colleagues in the Liberal Democrats, who were vocal in their opposition. And if one thing that happened, it created significant cross-party unity. And in fact, then, Mr. Chairman, Robert Jenrick, who's the Secretary of State, told the Nottingham Post on the 20th of July last year, he must have known it was my birthday, Mr. Chairman. Ben, I'm telling you that so you remember. I'm not in the business of 1970s top-down local government reform where we impose solutions on parts of the country that don't want them. And I think we are very clear that at borough and district level that we don't want these changes. So it should be a fait accompli. So I think this is the opportunity to send Mr. Jenrick that letter. And in fact, Chair, on the 1st of October last year, Mr. Jenrick's own council leader, Councillor David Lloyd, told the Newark Advertiser that plans for a Nottinghamshire Super Council were improper, ill-timed and disgusting. And as we recover from COVID, Mr. Chairman, it's critical that we concentrate on recovery and not get bogged down in a local government reorganisation that nobody asked for, and in fact now definitely doesn't have a mandate, because the only time it was mentioned in Conservative Party literature during the election to which the Conservatives won the majority were to outright flatly deny that it would ever happen, that it was not on the table, the Secretary of State wouldn't approve it, and even if we put a bid for it, it was dead at government. So the voters of Nottinghamshire went to the polls very clearly that the Conservative literature, of which I have many copies, across the county were fervent in their opposition to the idea of a unitary authority. So during the pandemic, Mr. Chairman, The 7 boroughs and district councils worked hand in hand with the county council and other key partners like the NHS, and councils were the shining beacon, I think, in terms of maintaining service delivery and in delivering the recovery. I'm sure that's what will happen now as we move. And in fact, the council created the COVID committee because it was so important what local government did. And there wasn't a day that went by where I wasn't talking to other colleagues across the county where their officers weren't volunteering to do other things, where ladies out of elections weren't emptying the dustbins, or committee staff in planning weren't making welfare calls. Local government rose to the call, and a reorganisation that puts their jobs at risk is a slap in the face for our frontline heroes who got our country, and particularly Nottinghamshire County, through what is the worst time in post-war history. And residents valued those local services, Mr. Chairman. They were local services delivered by local people. And the bigger a council, the less local and effective it becomes. And the independent group have put this motion down today so that right from the start of this administration, we can knuckle down and get on with what's important to people. And that is to focus entirely on recovery from COVID, economically and socially, for all the reasons we've heard in many debates already this morning. And to claim that the scrapping of district and borough councils would lead to huge savings, as we know, is a fallacy. All of the previous models didn't take into account savings that have already been realised through shared services. And of course, in Northern Ireland, the cost now of running the 11 councils has increased by 50 million a year compared to the old system of 26 local government bodies. And that's despite the exact same promise that it would save taxpayers money. And Mr. Chairman, we deliver different services. We already collect the council tax. As an administration, the Ashfield Independents just invested £2 million in parks this year alone. And I'm confident that wouldn't happen if that service was run from West Bridgford. We just this week put the steelwork up for the new Kirkby Leisure Centre, delivering a brand new swimming pool, top of the range leisure facilities, and work's about to start on a brand new swimming pool for Hucknall as well. That's localism in action, something that we all know wouldn't happen if services were centralised in West Bridgford. And at the same time, we froze council tax because localism allowed us to listen to local people, and they told us they couldn't pay any more, so we froze it. And any new super council for Nottinghamshire would be bigger than the whole of Cyprus. It would be bigger than Malta, Luxembourg and the Seychelles put together. And that makes an absolute mockery of local democracy. So, Mr. Chairman, bearing in mind Councillor Bradley's comments to the Evening Post on May the 11th, when he said so-called super councils don't exist, and stressing the idea that government have pulled the plug on the move, I would expect him today to support the motion, calling and to put the idea of one big council in Nottinghamshire to bed, Mr. Chairman. We've got bigger priorities coming forward, and I'm calling for unity across this council so that we can get on with the jobs we really need to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Doddy. Councillor Waters, do you want to second the motion?
Thank you. Firstly, congratulations, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair. I wish you all the best in your term. I'd also like to thank the residents of Hucknall South, my neighbours, for supporting me in big numbers. I will not let the residents down. As Councillor Zadrobny stated, the Ashfield Independents stand for localism, delivering for local residents. That is why I was so pleased to attend the opening of our first phase of works at Hucknall Leisure Centre a couple days ago. A brand new reception and other improvements, a new swimming pool, new changing rooms, and next we are delivering. That is localism in action. During the election campaign, resident after resident in Hucknall spoke about the prospect of going into Nottingham City if local government reorganisation goes ahead. Nottingham City Council leader, Councillor David Mellon, has already spoken about his expansion plans. This would be a disaster for a place like Hucknall. It would lose its identity. The proud town of Lord Byron would end and be sucked into the city. It would be the council taxpayer in Hucknall who will end up paying off the city's debt. That's a £1 billion debt in Nottingham. No one wants that, and we will continue to fly the flag for Hucknall. During the election, my Conservative opponent put a last-minute leaflet out claiming that local government reorganisation was not going to happen. They even mocked popular local newspaper, the Hucknall Dispatch, renaming it Hucknall Mythspatch, and made it look like it. It was a bit of cheek, to be honest, and an insult to the paper that had brought news to Hucknall since 1904. Now, no one wouldn't argue that local government reorganisation is in a mess. Over the last few months, while councils have been battling to support their local businesses and residents through the latest wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, North Yorkshire, Cumbria and Somerset have all been posed an additional challenge. The government 8-week consultation on local government reorganisation in those areas of the country finished on the 19th of April. You might think lockdown is not an ideal time to conduct an important consultation, given that public buildings were closed and no public events could be held, essentially excluding members of the community who have no access to the internet. You might think it is the wrong time for local government reorganisation altogether. I strongly believe that it is the wrong time. We need to send a clear message to the Right Honourable Robert Jendrick, MP and the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, that this doomed flirtation with a super council is over. There is no appetite for it. People in Hucknall spoke loud and clear in the county council elections. They did the same for the rest of Ashfield District. I spend a lot of my time in Titchfield Park with my 6-year-old son, Alexander. He loves the new play facilities, the new play park. If our council is run from West Bridgford, I'm not confident we would have seen that level of investment. The council would be far too big. A local council should be exactly what it says on the tin, local. As Councillor Zadrozny said, Mr. Chairman, we have a chance to put a stop to this today, Mr. Chairman. Please support this motion and get that letter in the post. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Lee and Jason, for that party political broadcast on behalf of the Ashfield Independent Party, which I very much enjoyed. David enjoyed it as well, I can tell. A bit of a stretch, perhaps, to connect new swimming pools to unitary authorities, but I like what you're trying to do. I think we've put this to bed, to be truthful. I'm not aware of any leaflets that said it would never happen, because I can't predict the future beyond my brief tenure in this place. And I don't think anybody has ever suggested that the city boundary would expand other than the Ashfield Independent Party. I certainly haven't. But we will no doubt come back to that in the future. I hope that we can avoid having a massive debate about the benefits or failures of unitary councils, because I can say first and foremost in this debate that it is not on the cards. I've written, as Councillor Zadrozny knows, to all district leaders this week and copied in the Labour group and Councillor Fole to put this to bed early doors. I'll read the extract from the letter that is pertinent. It says, of course, the plan will encompass the council's aspiration for devolution. This is the local plan council plan we're putting together over the summer. Aspirations for devolution and building on the government's Levelling Up White Paper, which is due soon. In setting out our plans in respect of devolution, I wish to make clear early on it's not my intention to formally revisit local government reorganisation. I'd prefer to expend time and energy on recovering from COVID-19, rebuilding our economy and bringing forward transformative plans for a diverse range of people and place-related services. That said, through our individual and collective relationships, I will want to examine all aspects of public sector reform, and in doing so, I'm sure none of us would want to rule out future conversations about ways we can work more closely together, align our services more effectively, or look at structures that might be beneficial and acceptable to all. I have no wish to revisit local government reorganisation formally. Councillor Zadrozny and I have already had a very positive conversation about how the county and Ashfield District Council might be able to share those services and buildings and work more effectively for our residents. So I intend to follow up on those conversations. I think the letter that I've sent to everybody states clearly that this is not an imminent priority. But having not yet had those conversations with leaders around the county, including the Conservative leaders that you mentioned, having not had those direct conversations with local representatives or indeed government at this stage, I think it will be a little bit daft to start writing letters ruling out anything, to be honest, before we've even started the process of having that discussion. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the way the amendment's drafted, and the one ask is to write a letter and rule this out permanently, I can't amend it without changing the nature of the ask in the motion, and therefore I'm not able to support it today, and the Conservative group's not able to support it. But you can take from the letter that I have sent to you, Councillor Drosney, this week, and to leaders across the county, that this is not on the cards. Those formal discussions are not imminent by any stretch of the imagination, and I hope that we can move beyond spending the next hour talking about whether it's right or wrong to do it, and accept that we're not going to do it, and perhaps get home a little bit earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Anyone else wishes to speak? Councillor Fowle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, the Labour Group agrees with much of what's set out in this motion. And the previous Conservative leader's vision of a huge single council operating from West Bridgeford was a really bad idea. It took away local democratic accountability and centralised power in a way that was never going to benefit the whole county and all its diverse communities. Labour pulled out of the cross-party working group set up by the last administration to look at LGR when it became very clear that the then Tory leader would accept nothing else but a single unitary council. By staying in, we were legitimising a flawed process, and it felt like a power grab, quite frankly. I mean, we all know our district councils do a really good job of delivering good quality services that are right for our communities, so why would we want to take that away? So we will be supporting this motion today, but I'm really disappointed that this has been tabled, and this is the first motion to be tabled now. It seems that government has taken this off the agenda, if the reports are accurate. I mean, most people I've spoke to on the doorstep, they're not interested in motions about structures, and they're sick of politicians arguing amongst themselves about this. And as you said, Councillor Drosney, I mean, we've been through years of austerity and a pandemic. We need to be looking at how we can better serve our communities, especially in areas of disadvantage. So although we agree with this motion, as I know we can continue to meet the needs of our residents now within the current structure, let's just get on with that rather than actually kind of arguing yet again about local government reorganisation.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fowle. I have 4 more speakers on my list. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have to firstly congratulate Councillors Drosney and Councillor Waters. And it's really great actually to see a new councillor bringing a motion, the very first motion of this new council to the Chamber. But you can tell, Councillor Bradley MP, you've been in Parliament a long time, and I'll tell you something, 50% of your group, including Councillor Clark sat next to you, who support don't support unitary authorities, will be very impressed by what you've said, and the 50% that do will be equally as supportive, because you managed to ride both horses in the same speech. And a motion like this is damn right fully intended to nail your colours to the chest of this
language, Councillor Hollis. I did say I wouldn't tolerate bad language.
And thank you, Chairman. And I think it's no surprise that it was a real central part of our campaign, particularly in parts of the county where our group made gains, Brinsley and Greasley, Hucknall included. And actually parts of the county the Conservative failed to make gains where they were expecting to, in places like Arnold. Places that were heavily affected by Councillor Mrs Cutts' demand to unify all the councils in Nottinghamshire, which the motion quite eloquently says would make us into some sort of super council. And at that point, none of us become local councillors. We all become administrators of what is a large body. And yes, you can probably all have a wry smile about the fact that we will champion some of the stuff we are doing as a local council. But that's because we have our ear to the ground. And frankly, the leisure centre is being built in a town I'm not the councillor. And if you ask me, do the residents of Huthwaite want to see a new leisure centre in Kirkby? It's a Kirkby issue. But the Kirkby councillors, quite rightly, are leading with that. And that's what you'd lose with something like a large unitary council. And it's very clear to me by what Councillor Bradley said there that it is very much still on the table. If it wasn't, why wouldn't you simply vote for it? And I think the reality is we have got a lot of challenges moving forward as an authority to bring ourselves out of the COVID pandemic. That's supporting businesses, supporting children's services, adult social care, all stuff that's crossed our desks as local councillors. And this council has a massive impact on how those things will change, how the high streets will look, how many children are in care homes, and how adult social care homes look, particularly with things like visitors, funding, etc. And the sad thing is, for the most of the last 4 years, our most highly paid officer, the Chief Executive, has spent most of his time looking at reunification. I want that man's time up there focusing on all those things that we all believe in localism. And it's really great to see the council leader nodding to that, but actually it's a little bit disappointing that, frankly, you can't just agree with this motion. Let's put it to bed, let's move on. And everything you just tried to say to all the councillors that don't support, with the greatest of respect, Councillor, and I won't interrupt you speaking, I'd ask you not to interrupt me, and I'm sure the chairman will pull me up when I interrupt you. But the point is, we've been elected with a mandate to stop this. And when I walked from Kirkby and Ashfield to West Bridgeford to show how long it would take to walk, it was a blooming long way. And residents really welcome having a council on their doorstep that delivers services, that knows their people. And a place like the County Council should be focused on the more strategic things that we care about, that Councillor Bradley said very well. But I think members in the Conservative group that might want to pretend that Councillor Bradley's brushed this under the carpet, it's very clear to me, if he did, he would be advising you all to vote for this. So I would ask, as an opposition member, that the 15 or so in your group that still believe that this council should remain with its duties and the local councils should stick to their duties, watch this space. And please do hold him to account. And you have a very good advocate in Councillor Clark in making sure he holds Mr Bradley to account equally. But thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. It's Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just want to pick up on what the leader said. Picking up, cannot guarantee there are no plans, not imminent priority, not starting the process. If there were to be a hidden plan or agenda, I would say it would be folly. The people of Hucknall will not stand for it. It would be a betrayal of the trust in their current Sherwood incumbent in the other place. I personally feel that there may well be a hidden agenda here. Why have a leader that is a MP, the leader of the council, and a councillor working for the government as well? So I'm seeking a clear, unequivocal assurance that there are, under no circumstances, will there be any proposal to this or the future administration to merge the districts into a unitary authority, as well as the future plans of incorporating Hucknall within the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we've started well, haven't we? I have to say to you, Ashfield Independents, because Jason stood up and spoke as an Ashfield Independent, that you've brought this motion a year too soon. We are here today, to actually form the new administration. The new administration has decided to do things in a different way. It's not how you go about winning the way you're going today. Sorry. At the end of the day, Ben Bradley, whatever he is, whether he walks on water, whether he's God or whoever he is, at the end of the day, he cannot guarantee anything. He's quite right. He doesn't know. He's not in the inner sanctum of cabinet, so he doesn't know what's afoot. But I'll tell you here and now, I've heard, and I do still have friends in high places, that it's not the intention of national government to look at reorganisation of local government at this moment in time. They've got better things to do, and the most important thing that you have all been talking about today is getting sorted out over COVID and the reorganisation of businesses and helping businesses move on and looking after people. So can we spend the first year getting that sorted out? And then when we've done that, I have no objection, Jason, to you and your team bringing forward, asking questions about reorganisation. But I will say this to you, I was never in favour of a large unitary authority, never. But I will say this, I am not an elephant that buries her trunk in the sand. I think at some stage things will have to alter. They're going to have to alter if local government is going to survive in the future, because it's called finances. And the sooner we all realise that, the better. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak on this issue. First of all, Councillor Dobson's probably saying that the newspapers that over the past 2.5 years that continually were on about the county council, borough and district councils, squabbling over who was going to take over and over, was all lies. Well, I don't think it was lies. I think they got to know a lot by a lot of the information that was true and at that time. And yes, I'm not going to take it from anybody else that didn't happen. May I say that it is a very wise move by the leader to announce that the government had pulled the plug on unitary authorities. As I walked around my ward almost every day over the past 3 years, and talking, of course, to hundreds of my constituents, most felt that it would be a serious mistake to create any super unitary authority or join up with the county council or do any other issue at this time. They're quite happy with how the local government is working at this present time. It says that it would be a serious mistake to create a super or unitary authority. Localism seems to be at the heart of the community. Everybody I'm talking to, they like to know what's happening within their own community and that things are being done for their own community, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. And can I say that I also welcome the news in the Conservative leaflets done by Kevin Rostance and Phil Rostance, two very able Conservative members and who worked very, very hard over a number of years for you, and they were very, very astute councillors. And also Jan Lees, who works very hard within the community also. But when they said that in the newspaper and on their leaflets, all sorts of situations, they said that it wouldn't happen and they wouldn't be scrapping the borough or the district council. And I welcome the Conservatives' change of mind on this issue, because it is a change of mind. You were all for it over the past 2 years, and now you've changed your mind without any doubt at all. Can I say that I do believe that the splendid cooperation and the working partnerships that this county council, the borough council, the district council and the NHS during this terrible pandemic, you've all done a wonderful job, and I'm really pleased that I can stand up today and thank you all for the hard work that has been done on this issue. And also, can I say finally, Mr. Chairman, I think it's only right that we do commit to our current model of local government by contacting the Secretary of State for Housing. I say that because it would put everything to bed. It would make the situation so much easier for us all to work together on other things and forget about this local government propagandas. That's all it is that's been over the past 2.5, 3 years of this authority. So I want to say, let's get to the job in hand and fight this pandemic and work through so we can all say to all the people in Ashfield, in Newark and Sherwood, in Rushcliffe, all over, to say we've actually defeated this pandemic, and it's be a splendid thing to say, to be able to somebody to stand up and say, yes, we've done it, all others. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many of you will have realised that was been here in the past, and new members will have to take my word for it, that I've always been a fierce critic and opponent of unitary authorities. They don't work particularly well where they have been introduced in the country. But we have to accept that things are changing at the moment, and we are about to get a levelling up white paper, which may, and I'm expecting it to, and I'm sure Councillor Bradley is expecting it to do, will actually give this and boroughs and districts more powers, not less. So it's, you don't know, but yeah. But it would really surprise me if that wasn't the case. I know exactly where the independent group are coming from with this motion, but I really do think it's probably 12 months too early to have this motion. I really have to take this. I've got the letter here that was sent to the leader and myself as deputy leader of Broxtowe Borough Council, and I'll read you the paragraph. This is from Councillor Bradley to myself and Milan Radulovic. It says, of course, the plan will encompass the Council's aspiration for devolution and building on the Government's levelling up white paper, which is due soon. In setting out our plans in respect to devolution, I wish to make it clear early on that it is not my intention to formally revisit local government reorganisation. I would prefer to expend time and energy on recovering from COVID-19, rebuilding our economy and bringing forward transformative plans for our diverse range of people and place-related services. Quite frankly, I think we have to take the leader of the council's word for that at this stage, and let's get on with rebuilding. And then if the Conservatives change their mind again and suddenly come up with a unitary authority, that's the time to beat them round the head with that letter. Absolutely. But at the moment, this isn't the priority. No. I believe what Councillor Bradley has said in that letter, and I think for the time being we should move on. All right.
Councillor Carr, was that a motion to move to the vote, or was I mishearing you?
I propose a motion to move to the vote, Mr. Chairman. Do I have a seconder?
You do. You still have your right.
Happy to second that, Chair.
All those in favour? Yeah. Can you keep your hands up while we count? It is difficult in these circumstances.
You, Steve.
I nearly forgot.
Okay, so that's 36. So can you ask for those again?
Those against? Only one hand, Councillor Pringle. Any abstentions? That was easy.
Okay. So, Chairman, the motion was to move to the vote, just so we're clear about that. And there were 36 for moving to the vote, there were 24 against, and there were 2 abstentions. So the motion to move to the vote is carried, but we must then return to the procedures and offer the mover of the motion the opportunity to sum up.
Councillor Zadrozny.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure how long I get to summate. I think it's about 45 minutes. So I'll keep it short. I am disappointed, Mr. Chairman, that we chose that tack of moving to the vote immediately, because it is an important debate, and I'm particularly disappointed for the Labour group, actually, who didn't have an equal representation in the debate as far as I'm concerned, particularly Arnold members, who are very, very affected by this. But that's the decision of the Chamber. I just think it's disappointing.
Councillor Payne, would you mind not interrupting whilst a member is on his feet speaking?
I just feel it's disappointing because it is important, and I definitely feel that Councillor Fole, Dobson, and Carr missed the point of what my original oration was, because they all asserted that this wasn't the right time because we have to get on with COVID and recovery, and that's exactly my point. Put this to bed, say it's dead, because we've got bigger things to worry about. And look, Ben, you are a wonderful politician. I admire you greatly. We've been good friends for a long time. But you wrote that letter 2 days after I submitted this motion. And naughtily, after that morning on your sofa when we sat and talked about this for a long time, it was in an office. It's not as glamorous as I was alluded to. But we spoke about these things. And I think we genuinely both agree that there's stuff that's a different priority. But from our point of view, Councillor Wilmot sat in your old seat with an 1,100 vote majority because people in Hucknall are terrified about this. And there's a number of people here who booked the National Conservative swing trend because they were terrified, their residents were terrified that services would be diluted at a point when we've got to concentrate on the recovery for our county. And that was the whole point of this motion. And I really do appreciate what you wrote to us after it was submitted. But this motion, and I appreciate it's very difficult for you to amend the motion, but I didn't tell you what to write in the letter. That it asks you to write a letter which could very easily say to Robert, look, this isn't a priority for us at the moment. For the next couple of years, we are going to be concentrating on children's services and economic regeneration and just fixing potholes, back to basics, the stuff that will be in your record that you'll be judged by. We didn't ask you what to put. And we're dead on board with devolution. Of course we are. I'm the leader of a district council who would love more power. Council leaders across the country, across every political spectrum, moan and moan and moan that they don't have enough powers. And actually they have loads. But there's very few of us like me, and I hope like you soon, who will flex the muscle of the powers they've got. But if we get even more to do more for our residents, then I'm dead on board with devolution. And as I said to you in the private meeting, nothing that I won't say here, I'm dead on board with us looking at sharing services better, sharing buildings better, sharing HR and payroll and things that don't affect us so long as local government, the element of democracy where my politics has always been, where decisions are made as close to the people they affect as possible, where that bit of governance still stays. I honestly don't give a toss about who runs the planning service. I care about how it affects those people. And if we can work together on those things, I think that's great. And the reason this motion's at the first meeting and not in a year is so that it never has to come up again. We get rid of it, it's gone, and we can focus on all that stuff. And that's what's really important. Tom said something about, when I walked from Kirkby. We literally walked for 5 hours. We didn't just talk the talk, we walked the walk to show how far it is from Kirkby to West Bridgeford. And it wasn't a trite thing to do, that's to show how physically far apart it is if those services are centralised in that way. And even now, we're talking about the potential of working together when the county council's on this enormous £28 million building plan, when we've got a district council, John's got a district council office, lots of your colleagues have. We can work on all that stuff. Some of this is folly. We just need to get around a table in a much more grown-up way than we were unable to do because of personalities. I love the letter. You sent it after I wrote this. He can't walk on water. He's not the Messiah. He's a naughty boy. He wrote it after. And Ben, I genuinely appreciate that you've wrote that letter. And I genuinely believe that you've wrote it in good faith. But I do think I've got to have that assurance that's more concrete sometimes than your word. I do believe, actually, from the years of knowing you, that you've written it in good faith and that you're true to your word. But I've got a district of 150,000 residents who want to see something concrete, that this isn't on the cards for a bit. Even if we're not all stupid and some way down the line things change, that at the moment we have got far more important things to sort out. You know, there's bigger things on the agenda, and I just think it's clear you're not going to support it. But what happens because of this motion afterwards and in private when we have leaders' discussions is vital that we get on the same agenda, because although we won't always agree on things, we need to work really hard on the stuff that we can. And I think it's become very clear across this chamber today that that is a pretty open invitation from all of us, parties and groups and none, that we're willing to start this new 4 years in a real spirit of optimism, that we can put to bed the stuff, or at least pigeonhole the stuff we disagree on, and really rail ahead with the stuff we do. And we've got that, we've given you that assurance. This is one of the things I need you to park, so that we can concentrate on adult social care and children's services and saving money and roads and pavements and everything else that we're all passionate about. And I hope very much, despite the way the vote's clearly going to go, that in the leaders' meetings afterwards we can build those bridges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rodney. Can we move to the vote then?
Can I just read Standing Order 86, point of personal clarification, please? I wasn't aware, Mr. Chairman, that vote was actually to bring this debate to an end. I thought, and I think Councillor Dobson did as well, that it was actually the vote on the substantive motion. I'd like it recorded that if I'd have known that, I would have voted against bringing it to a vote then, because there were clearly people in the Labour group that have not had the chance to speak.
I must have misheard you, Councillor Carr. I thought you were calling for the debate to come to an end. The way you were talking, and
That's my personal view, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry if you didn't understand that we were putting it to move to the vote. I think I was quite clear in my statement about what we were voting on. If you didn't hear, then perhaps you need a new hearing aid, Councillor Carr. But can we move to the vote? All those in favour?
I have an apology for that, please, Mr. Chairman. I don't wear a hearing aid. The sound is not very good in here, and that was a very personal comment, and I take exception to it.
I'm sorry if you don't like my sense of humour, Councillor Carr, and I will apologise. All those against?
Are there any abstentions?
Any abstentions?
You need to see some hands, Chair.
We need 10 of you to stand for a recorded vote.
Hands up. Hands up will do.
Well, hands up will do, but... well, I can see you when you stand. I can't see all the hands at the back. Have we got 10?
Colleagues, we need, if we're going to record the vote, we need 10 hands. So if colleagues can count. Okay, so we've got 10. So first of all, colleagues, I'm going to tell you the vote for the show of hands, which was 24 for the motion, 36 against it, with 2 abstentions. And now I'll take a recorded vote. May I start, please, with Councillor Adair? Councillor Adams? Councillor Allen? Councillor
Yeah, I heard. Thank you, Paul, and I've got you. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Against.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Barney.
Against.
Councillor Barnfather.
Against.
Councillor Bradley.
Against.
Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Callaghan. Councillor Camilleri.
Against.
Councillor Carlton.
Against.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor John Clark.
For.
Councillor Neil Clark.
Against.
Councillor Corden.
Against.
Councillor Cotty.
Against.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Cubley.
Against.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Councillor Dobson.
Abstain.
Councillor Doddy.
Against.
Councillor Eddy.
Against.
Councillor Elliott.
Against.
Councillor Fielding.
For.
Councillor Fole. Councillor Guilfoyle.
For.
Councillor Girling.
Against.
Councillor Gowland.
For.
Councillor Henry.
For.
Councillor Henshaw.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
For.
Councillor Introna.
Against.
Councillor Richard Jackson. Councillor Roger Jackson. Councillor Kerry.
Against.
Councillor Lawton. Councillor Lee.
Against.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Meakin. Councillor Moxon.
Against.
Councillor Ogle.
Against.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Place. Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Purdue Horan.
Against.
Councillor Quigley.
Against.
Councillor Saddington.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Smith. Helen Ann Smith.
For.
Councillor Sam Smith.
Against.
Councillor Tom Smith.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Upton.
Against.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Welsh.
For.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Daniel Williamson.
For.
Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Zadrozny.
For.
Thank you, colleagues. We're just going to top those up. Chairman and councillors, it's 24 for the motion, it's 36 against, and there were 2 abstentions. So the motion is defeated, Chairman.
Thank you. We move on then to motion 2, and I call upon Councillor Helen Ann Smith to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and firstly, congratulations to yourself and to the Vice Chairman on your roles appointed today. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to move a slight alteration to my motion. It is with Sarah Ormond, and she'll be passing that around. I don't know if you want me to read it out as it's being distributed or sit down for while it's being distributed.
I think we can remain seated if we're passing round a copy and give us a chance to have a look. Do we want to? We don't want to adjourn, do we? No. Thank you, everybody. Once the papers have been distributed, if we could adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. I don't think we need to move out of the chamber. Just give everybody a chance to read the amended motion. And when our staff have finished dealing it out, has everyone got a copy?
5 minutes from now.
So 5 minutes from now, and we'll reconvene the meeting. Anne Smith then to move her amended motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nottinghamshire County Council notes the ambition to end all single-use plastics in Nottinghamshire, the UK and globally, and the climate change commitments this authority has made. Globally, we produce 150 tonnes of plastic each year that is only used once for the likes of water bottles and food containers. Much of this plastic cannot be recycled and is not biodegradable. This is having a devastating impact on our oceans and marine life. This council therefore resolves to source locally, preferably within Nottinghamshire, food and drink and all hospitality, and to reduce and ultimately cease procurement of non-recycled single-use plastic for food and drink containers in line with timescales set out in the Environment Strategy Action Plan. To aim to recycle all water and drinks bottles used in the delivery of our services and promote a culture of using sustainable non-plastic materials wherever possible, continuing progress made across the Council in recent years to reduce reliance on single-use plastics, and to promote the use of sustainable water cooler supplies for staff and visitors in all County Council buildings, and encourage businesses to become free water filling stations. Mr. Chairman, I'll go to speak to the motion if that's okay. In March 2018, Nottinghamshire County Council unanimously agreed to reduce its reliance on single-use plastics. Since then, significant progress has been made, like the introduction of reusable coffee cups across council buildings, canteens and biodegradable takeaway cartons. PET recyclable salad boxes and wooden straws for hot drinks have also been introduced across all council sites. This motion does two main things, Mr. Chairman. It strengthens our position on single-use plastics and encourages the council to source locally. I know a cross-party group of MPs are reintroducing the Plastics Pollution Bill with backing from numerous MPs and groups including Keep Britain Tidy, Tearfind and Surface Against Sewerage. The bill calls for a 2025 target to end non-essential single-use plastics. It also argues that bans which come into effect last year did not include plates, cutlery and drinks containers. It also includes a statutory long-term target to significantly cut plastic waste and pollution by 2042. It aims to do this by phasing out all but the most essential uses of plastic. We need firm action on plastic pollution now, well beyond what we are already doing on climate change. Plastic pollution has not gone away, but the damage done by plastic pollution and microplastics will be with us for decades, if not centuries to come. I've had a look at the Notts County Council Supplies website, and the sale of single-use plastics is concerning in this climate. Toilet cleaners, liquid powder bleach, washing up liquid, bathroom cleaners, antibacterial and soap and much, much more. We should be doing better. County suppliers are one of our biggest customers. We are calling for the Council to lead the way on ending the use of single-use plastics. We can use the procurement process to make this happen. By seeking to end the procurement of any plastic in this context and to cease the culture of single-use plastic water bottles and food containers, we are leading the way and will show after recent bad headlines. We are a council that is serious about climate change and want to source as locally as possible. After the last 14 months, our businesses and hospitality industry has taken a huge hit. What better way than this to making sure we help to shop local? Please support this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Daniel Williamson to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair, and may I just join everybody in congratulating you and the Vice Chair on your elevations to your new positions. As this is my maiden address to this county council, I would also like to take just a second to put on record my thanks to my predecessor, Councillor Rachel Madden, who served with distinction at this council for well over a decade with enthusiasm, pride and drive, and I'm happy to let you all know that she continues her work in local government at ADC as a very, very valued cabinet member. Rachel was a very, very keen environmental campaigner, and I have no doubt that if she was here instead of me, she would be rising to second this motion, as I do now. Fighting climate change is a cause that is close to my heart. It should be a cause that is close to all of our hearts. If we care about our residents, we care about their families, their friends and their futures. we have to care about climate change. If we care about climate change, then we have to care about the pollutive impact of using single-use plastics, both in our personal lives and in our professional working lives. It's a cause that is close to my own heart. At Ashfield District Council, where the environmental strategy falls under my responsibility, this is a move that we are already making to remove every single piece of single-use plastic that we can. We all know the damage that it does. I don't need to be David Attenborough and stand here and show you a lovely video from the BBC for you all to know how much it impacts all of our lives. This motion is here to reaffirm our commitment to ending their usage. You may have seen, some of you, that single-use plastics have been in the news this week. Plastic waste collection company Divert.co.uk have reported a dramatic increase in the number of single-use plastic bags, particularly in the fresh produce sections in supermarkets. A lot of this has been put down primarily to shoppers' fears about catching COVID-19, and this could undo years of campaigning from a wide variety of groups across the board. I would suggest that they haven't taken into account the fact that the science does seem to show that transmission risk via surfaces and objects is incredibly low. Giving your fruit and your veg a good wash before you use them should be precaution enough. Now, as Councillor Smith has said, this council passed a well-intentioned motion in 2018 along similar lines. It was good that it won all party support, and I will hope today that you will all choose to do the same. We want to remove single-use plastics from the council's operations. We want to engage with suppliers and switch to alternative products. And yes, we want those products to be provided locally. We're keen to support Nottinghamshire becoming plastic-free as a county, but it's important for this council to provide opportunities for reuse, to help cut our excessive plastic within our own buildings, and to lead the dialogue with organisations across Hampshire, retailers, supermarkets, everybody we can get on board for this. We need to introduce innovative projects like county-wide refill campaigns, like creating sustainable water supplies across all our buildings. Chairman, I'm incredibly pleased to second this motion, and I hope that you will all see clear to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I remind you, in this chamber, I'm referred to as Chairman, not Chair. I have three speakers. Councillor Creamer, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's right to actually support this reworded motion. Totally agree with it. Just we could actually hopefully we'll actually give it some responsibility to actually work with our partners. I know the district councils, as he's already said, Ashfield, Gedling, others are actually working as hard as they can to get rid of actually single-use plastics. But it would be nice to actually think that we're actually encouraging our contractors, our other partners, to actually go along with us in this respect as well. And if we could actually perhaps use the new leader's new position and old position as well, in actually pushing to Parliament, because some of these acts, the help we could actually use is the same as what has literally just been mentioned, is on the use of plastics in wrappings, etc. That's going to be a national thing. There's nothing we can do particularly locally about that. We can encourage supermarkets, we can encourage where we can, and we should be doing that. So yes, totally support it. It needs to be reviewed at some time to see just how well we're doing. So I hope, without actually putting an amendment in, that will be actually implicit in it that 6 months or a year, we'll actually find out just what we've done, where we started now, and where we're going to be, and where we're going to wind up, which is the end of single-use plastics, wherever possible. And I say wherever possible because some things, and I can't think exactly where, but for instance, needles, they're single-use. They might be metal, but the end of it is screwed. It's single-use plastics. So wherever we can, we need to get rid of single-use plastics. They're clogging the earth up. They're clogging everywhere up. When you go around now and actually see plastics, plastic masks all over the place as well. So yes, totally agree with it, and just hope we can actually review it in the future positively and move forward. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Neil Clark.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm very grateful, and our Conservative group is very grateful to the mover and seconder agreeing our suggested change of words, so that given Councillor Zadrozny's words in the previous debate about spirit of optimism and working together, I think this is something that where we can all support it, and we should all support it, and we should be showing that we're working together, and we should be leading by example and ensuring that we are telling people that we are doing all we possibly can to reduce the scenarios. I won't go and repeat what the mover and seconder quite rightly listed as things that we shouldn't be doing anymore. The TV pictures in all the conservation programmes says it all. Wouldn't it be nice? And if we, in the future, and if Veolia, when we talked about reviewing the waste contract, wouldn't it be nice if Veolia never had any single-use plastic bottles put through their plant that needs recycling because people have stopped using them? So that's just one example. In terms of packaging, I think then it is incumbent upon us, wherever we can as a council, where appropriate, where there are contractors using packaging that perhaps is not appropriate, it's something we need to look across all our operations across the council, not just within the offices, not just single-use plastic bottles, but whatever we can in order to reduce it. And it is absolutely vital that we do lead by example and encourage businesses and all our residents to follow that example, and let's help continue to save the planet. It's something that we are going to be discussing in the next motion, in fact, almost in both motions, but certainly the next motion anyway. So in that spirit of cooperation, let's get on with saving the planet and reducing plastic. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Mike Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your new role, and also Councillor Jackson on his appointment. Chairman, I speak in support of the motion, and in my role as the Vice Chairman of Transport and Environment, with a particular focus on environment. My journey into plastics and waste began over 10 years ago while on a surfing trip in Cornwall. I saw a group of people with bags and litter pickers going around collecting rubbish, and once we had finished enjoying the waves, we got talking to them. And they were a local organised group called Surfers Against Sewage. And their whole plan originally was to stop the actual flow of water going through the sewage systems and blowing out raw sewage into the beaches and into the sea. But supplementary from that came, as it went down the waterways, the plastics started to appear as well. And I noticed that Councillor Smith mentioned about the microplastics, which I think is a really good point. And specifically, we're heading into a journey of false grass as well around the UK at the moment. A lot of people are installing grass which is plastic, and again, eventually will break down and will turn into microplastics also. Something else to consider that maybe hasn't been on the actual discussion so far. Councillor Creamer talked about the masks, and he's absolutely right, and something we had to do and was had to happen during the pandemic is we've had to live in a more disposable society than any of us would have wished to. It was a symptom of having to get rid of things that could potentially be contaminated. But the problem that this causes, ladies and gentlemen, is the waste ends up in the sea, and as Councillor Smith pointed out, damages our marine life. But it actually doesn't just damage them in the sense that we end up eating the plastic that's been consumed by this marine life, but it also damages the ability of the fish and the wildlife in the sea to actually continue to expand in numbers. And just a further example of another environment where I've witnessed and seen plastic was again in Snowdon, Mount Snowdon, over 1,000 feet up, over 1,000 metres above sea level. There was waste plastic there. And in the fields as you're walking, I'm sure many of you have done country walks during the pandemic. You've been walking through farmers' fields, and you've noticed in the plough field much single-use plastic also that's been discarded. It's everywhere. It's rife, and there'll be a sediment somewhere in the sea in a few thousand years' time, and they'll go, that was the 21st century. It won't just be the nice, interesting iron tools or stone tools. It will be the ruin that has been policy as a whole world, really, in regards to the way we've dealt with single-use plastic. So what do we do about this? Well, refill. I was really happy to see shops and cafes and businesses offering free water refill points. And I think it's been pointed out that the district councils have done a lot of those as well around parks and things like that, which has been fantastic. But you shouldn't be refilling using disposable plastic bottles. You know, they contain chemicals bisphenol A, which has been linked to, as I said, damaging the sexual hormones of marine life, but also is believed to contribute to infertility in humans as well. Refuse. So discuss your concerns with single-use plastic with your mate, the cafe owner, and challenge them to replace plastic products with wooden stirrers and reusable coffee cups. And similarly, across the county councils, businesses they operate with also. And raise awareness with friends and family. Reuse, like we've talked about. Take a bag with you if you need to the supermarkets. Recycle, like Councillor Clark mentioned as well. You know, let's try and stop. Let's get everything that can be recycled. And if it's not recycled, well, maybe the manufacturers should stop using it. Plastic-free spotting. Look to buy plastic-free items for everyday life, such as bamboo toothbrushes. And we've got some bamboo straws at home, which are very good. But also, you know, things like sharing, bringing food into offices. Maybe, you know, somebody makes a pie, somebody makes a cake, I don't know, and somehow between you end up sharing a meal without any single-use plastic on show. So, yeah, Chairman, today's motion focuses on what this council can do to play its part in reducing single-use plastic. But in order to achieve the scale and speed of our change our environment requires, we need buy-in from every individual. Plastic pollution was previously become normalised, and ending it has to become the new normal. Those of us of a certain generation certainly cannot claim ignorance. We've heard a message since childhood, even if it has taken us too long to heed it. The Wombles, who have been telling us since 1968, making good use of the things that we find, things that the everyday folks leave behind. Wombles are organised, work as a team, Wombles are tidy, Wombles are clean. Making the most of everything, even bottles and tins, pick up the pieces and make them into something new is what we should do. I'm not singing though, Councillor Girling, I'm not singing. Chairman, I won't tell you or any other member of this council to remember you're a Womble.
10 seconds, Councillor Adams.
I won't tell you or any other member of this council to remember you're a Womble, but I will support this motion and I urge others to do the same. Thank you.
Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to talk on this very, very important issue this afternoon. You know, Mr. Chairman, surely this is a motion that all councillors should support, and I'm listening to the debate now, and it seems that everyone's in agreement. I'm really pleased about that, because it's one of the issues that my electorate bring up time and time again about the issue. But of course, they need leadership on this to make sure that things do happen. I mean, this motion supports what this authority is already all about anyway. You know, it's brilliant that over the last few years that this authority has said it's going to do something about it. Whether it has done something about it is a different matter, but at least now we are talking closely between us all to make a difference. And I say, we only have to look at some of the television documentaries that's going about just at this moment. It tells you what a mess this world of ours is in on climate change. Plastic is a substance that is discarded so easily. You've only got to look round on the pavements, on the roads, in our open spaces, anywhere that an event has taken place, on our beaches, floating in the sea, in the rivers and the ponds. In fact, most places where people have been. And most of it, of course, can't be recycled. It's a problem, isn't it? So I support this motion, and if at all, or maybe it might be the start of something really big if we really publicise this, because it's an essential part of making our world better. There's no doubt about it. And of course, this council will be judged on our decisions as far as climate change is concerned. Can I say that only decisions by us and the government will make a difference to stopping plastic use, and the general public will only do what is required of them if they get good leadership from the front. And I'm sure that all of us here will be looking to and making sure that the message gets over to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Fole.
Thank you. Yes, and of course we'll support this motion, and we absolutely welcome the spirit of this. I mean, I think it has a lot of good content. The problem with it is I don't think it goes far enough. And listening to everybody here who's made all sorts of contributions, what I would suggest that would be a good addition to the motion. I'm not suggesting an amendment, but perhaps a way forward is to actually get a coherent strategy that actually starts from where the packaging is first kind of designed and produced. So you would get a strategy for the entire process from production through to consumption and waste. That way you can actually kind of make a real difference, I think. That would mean working with manufacturers as well as trying to kind of influence behaviour, because we all have a responsibility for this, don't we? So I just think it just lacks a suggestion around an overall strategy, rather than kind of individual actions. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be in this room and realise everybody agrees with this agenda. I just wish this was a bit stronger. To aim to promote, to encourage is pushing the problem down the line. You know, if we solve this, we'll also help solve the waste recycling problem. It would be better if this was more definite, but clearly this is a good motion as it stands to start with.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. It is whistling round this speaker system. Everybody's having difficulty and none of us wear hearing aids on the back, Chairman. I'm very happy to support this motion, but very sad that you actually removed the wording of the county-wide refill campaign. I would have said the county-wide refill stations, because for all of your benefit, in the division that I represent, I have a village in the middle of nowhere that actually set this up 18 months ago. It's absolutely superb, and what I'd like to ask, Chairman, if the Chairman of Highways would be so kind as to join me and answer his phone when I leave him a message, if he would be so kind. I've left him one message. I don't intend to leave him 2 messages. So if he would be kind enough to answer my phone, could we possibly arrange for him to come over and I would take him down there to that village and show him what that village are achieving, and he can come back and respond to everybody, because it's first class what they're doing. They're well on the way to getting people in that area, 2 small villages, actually going with their own pots, their own pans, and they're filling everything up from a machine and not utilising plastic or anything. It's an excellent idea, so I'd welcome the Chairman to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Of course, I can support this wholeheartedly, and just like to pick up something as well that was mentioned earlier by Councillor Clark, and that's the need to revisit the contract with Veolia, the recycling contract, which I totally agree with him isn't fit for purpose now. I don't get so much complaining about littering. Most people come to me and say, why can I not recycle this bit of plastic? Yet if I go over the border into Derbyshire, I can. And it's just a nonsense that we're living with this archaic recycling contract. So that would be brilliant if we could sort that out. Just really, this is the time to take drastic action, and we've got to be part of that. 3 years ago, myself and my wife visited Vietnam. And now some people may have been, we went to an island called Phu Quoc, which is off Cambodia actually, but it belongs to Vietnam. And they've got the longest cable car in the world that goes down a string of islands for getting on for about 10 kilometres, very high. And the plastic in the sea is everywhere. It's all over the beaches, all over the rocks, all around the water villages. You see huge areas of it floating in the sea. And if we don't, there's not a lot we can do about Vietnam. They are starting to clean their act up. But if we don't take drastic action here in the UK and in the EU,
then we could be in this situation. There are signs of that already, as been mentioned earlier. So the sooner that we can do something about this as an authority ourselves and take our own personal responsibility, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Anyone else? Are we done? Can I call upon Councillor Helen Ann Smith to sum up then, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you everyone for your input today. I'm really pleased that we can all come behind this, and as we have said a few times today, it does show that we are on a new trajectory for this council, and it does show some good collaborative working. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points and chuck something in Ben's direction, actually. Kate, what you were talking about the coherent strategy, and also what you were talking about, Councillor Carr, with the Veolia contract. I am aware that the government are in the second stage of the waste strategy review, and they're back out of consultation with that, where they are looking at doing the coherent strategy so that all councils across the country recycle the same things. And also, as part of that, they are looking at working with manufacturers to reduce the amount of single-use plastics and how manufacturers operate. So, Ben, if I could ask you to push from your side in government, then that would be really appreciative. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time today, and thank you everyone for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Excuse me. I would move to the vote then. All in favour? I would say that was unanimous. Thank you, members. That is a unanimous vote in favour of the motion. So we move on then to motion 3. And I call upon Councillor Ben Bradley to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everybody for
Councillor Bradley, you've just made the ultimate faux pas.
Chairman, I'm so sorry. I take it back immediately. Correcting myself, thank you. I'll start again, shall I? Thank you, Chairman. Very grateful. This motion, I hope, can build on the unanimity that we have just found in the previous one. And Councillor Smith, of course, I can take that away. And I hope this is an example of where that connection might be useful as we go forward. Although I cannot tell government what to do, I can certainly go and give it a go. So this motion seeks to build on previous motions. I'll read it out in the first instance. In May 2019, a motion calling for Nottinghamshire County Council to set out a carbon neutral target and implement an associated governance structure to closely monitor carbon emissions received unanimous support from members of this chamber. In October 2020, the Council agreed to commit to carbon neutrality in all of its activities by 2030 or as soon as possible thereafter. The Council now formally agreed to declare a climate emergency and to delegate the new Transport and Environment Committee to take the lead in considering, agreeing and overseeing appropriate measures to achieve this authority's commitment to achieve carbon neutrality in all its activities by 2030. All other committees of the Council will be expected to ensure that the decisions they take within their remit adhere to this principle, and the relevant actions agreed across all of these committees will be reported to full Council on a regular basis, so that every member has an ongoing overview of the progress being made, which I hope also deals with the point made earlier, I think it was by Councillor Creamer, about reporting back on progress. We do intend to do that. As I said, this motion seeks to build on 2 previous motions agreed by full Council in 2019 and 2020, and is a first step for this new administration to demonstrate its commitment by playing its part in tackling the global climate emergency. We'll use the tools at our disposal to have a positive impact on our communities and our environment, and to turn our administration firmly in the direction of seeking cleaner, greener approaches to everything we do. Those previous motions set out plans to develop a new corporate environment strategy and formally agreed a carbon neutral target date of 2030. This new motion sets out the intention of the new Conservative administration to formally declare a climate emergency and to embed green principles of sustainability and carbon reduction at the heart of everything we do. We'll be on the front foot and we'll make this a priority. It's important to recognise that Nottinghamshire has taken many positive steps on the carbon reduction and green initiatives and has been picking up the pace on this, in fairness, on this agenda over recent years. For example, in saving 300 million over the past 10 years, this authority shifted away from old-fashioned ways of working, resource-intensive ways of working, towards modern, often digital methods. Even before the pandemic, we were increasing opportunities for remote working, reducing the amount of travelling required for members of staff, and also reducing our requirement to house large numbers of staff in big, often inefficient buildings, something that is perhaps an opportunity from COVID for us to take further. We've secured funding for new green infrastructure, including investment in our electric buses now operating in the county, and we've got 20 million in our forward capital programme for further green initiatives. We received 6.1 million to deliver the Go Ultra Low programme, which was aimed to persuade more people to convert to ultra low emissions cars and vans, and we invested in expanding our own fleet of electric vehicles, in charging points, and we've also we offer advice as an organisation to other organisations to do the same. Through the Active Travel Fund, we're working to encourage cycling and walking to protect air quality, to increase employment, to tackle congestion, to promote healthier lifestyles, on top of the millions we've invested in cycling improvements. And we've rolled out more than 70,000 LED streetlights across Nottinghamshire, which has saved over 70,000 tonnes of carbon, along with £10 million in energy costs. So although there may have been a perception in the past, and I accept, around the commitment of this authority to green initiatives, to climate change, I think the facts speak for themselves, and I want to re-emphasise that commitment today, put a firm line in the sand about our priority going forward. There are lots of measures and actions already underway, and this administration will build on that progress and put sustainability at the heart of what we do, including ensuring that we are investing in infrastructure or supporting development that incorporates environmental measures to protect habitats, to encourage pollination, to offset our carbon footprint. There is much that we can do. And already in these early weeks of the administration, we've been delighted to receive news of £76 million investment from Government and Severn Trent in Mansfield to support more sustainable drainage, flood relief solutions, which will include more green spaces, tree planting, improving drainage by breaking up the concrete, going from grey to green, through a programme of 15,000 interventions that we hope will provide a great deal of learning that we can then apply around the rest of the county. So we'll be working closely with Severn Trent to help them identify those interventions, and I look forward to meeting with them very soon. This motion will give oversight of our plans to the Chair of the Transport and Environment Committee to oversee implementation of these and other proposals, including, of course, scrutiny by cross-party members of that committee, and will agree that other committees across all areas of the Council will consider environmental measures and actions as part of their work. And we'll report this regularly to full Council to give members full sight of our progress. Mr Chairman, I'm pleased to be able to bring forward this motion as one of my first actions as leader of the Council, and the importance of this work can't be overstated. I'm confident we can make more progress and that we can be innovative and forward-thinking in our approach, so we can take action in a way that's also financially viable and sustainable too. I believe that this year, with COP26 taking place in the UK in the autumn, there will be opportunities to build on previous government support on environmental action and for there to be more synergy across different layers of government to deliver on this priority. I hope that members from all parties will support us today as we set off on this long and vitally important path. And I just want to, before I sit down, Mr Chairman, clarify and perhaps reach out in the spirit of unanimity from our previous motion to touch on what's been mentioned before. I know we brought that motion beforehand to a close and there were some frustrations back there in the room. The reason for that is because I want to get to these vitally important motions and the business we've got to do today, conscious we're going over some old ground that we'd already said wasn't likely to come forward. So I hope that members can recognise that, and we can talk about the reasons and the wherefores of why it worked or didn't work. But I hope that we then have time to come to this, to debate this fully, and to get onto our highways motion and have the same input into what I know is a huge priority for all councillors across all of the parties represented here today. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Call upon Councillor Neil Clark to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I have pleasure in seconding the motion. I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Chairman. And firstly, let me say hallelujah. The motion that comes forward is a Labour motion presented again from the Conservatives. But the climate emergency isn't a political colour of anything. So we'll fully support this motion moving forward because it absolutely matters. To be quite honest, Councillor Kerry, this affects the pensions as well. And for 2 years, pension members have battered themselves to drive forward disinvestment from fossil fuels. This motion is absolutely supporting that. And that's brilliant. We understand our fiducial duties. We understand that, Eric, as well. But there has to be a drive faster than what we're seeing presently. So, well done. Well done for bringing it. Well done for using the Labour policy brought forward. I'm not colorising anything at all, a little bit perhaps. But we will fully support this because this matters to everybody. So thank you. Yeah, green. Sorry, I like the green pen. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Gowland.
Thanks very much. As I've said already, I'm really excited to be joining a forward-looking council that recognises the vital importance of this issue to protect our environment and leave an inhabitable planet for our children and grandchildren. I sincerely hope everybody understands the magnitude of the consequences of this motion. I have hope, given the plans to change the recycling contract. I have concerns, given the soft language in the motion on the plastics. I have concerns, given that only yesterday I understand that Ben Bradley MP voted against an amendment to the Environment Bill to ban fracking. And that's just the sort of action we need if we're to take this seriously. At the start of this meeting, Councillor Bradley talked about the council not being in the right place in the past. And I hope that people who did not have the guts to stand up for what they clearly believe now will do so in the future. The climate doesn't just mean CO2, as we've discussed today, and it doesn't just mean in 50 years or 100 years, it means now. It means health and economic problems now. We heard last week that children's attendance at GPs goes up when the quality of air is poor. I know that pollution is found in the percentage of newborn babies. In 2016, the Royal College of Physicians released a report, Every Breath We Take, that reported that every year air pollution causes 40,000 premature deaths a year, disproportionately affecting the most disadvantaged in the community. Look at what we've done to save ourselves from COVID in the last year, and that number of people have died since that report has come out. The number of people who've died of COVID have died from the air pollution since the report from the Royal College of Physicians. I'm delighted by this motion. Please don't let it be greenwash. I believe that everybody in this room believes in this motion, but we need the confidence and courage to take our residents with us. We need to make the important and radical changes that will allow us to build the new green economy and ultimately improve all our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gale. And Councillor Ogle.
Thank you, Chairman. May I congratulate you in your newly elected role as our Chairman of the Council, and also Roger as your Vice Chairman. I'll begin with an overview of what I want to discuss and move to council relevance. I look forward to progressing the agenda in this motion as Vice Chairman of the Transport Committee, while we are focusing on the emergency of emissions and their effect on the environment and the climate from their generation and reduction within the council. It is worth remembering that degradation and devastation to habitats and environments within the world are still taking place, whatever we do here. Changes in the climate have always taken place. Events such as meteor strike, more recently volcanic eruptions and their emissions can now be proved to have caused famines and periods of bad weather, climate, that devastated past civilisations. And even in our own country, several times in the last couple of thousand years, the climate has changed for some of these reasons. On a different timescale and for different reasons, deforestation has affected the climate. Currently, deforestation of the Amazon is still taking place. This was flagged up 30 years ago at least, but currently grazing and arable land is still being created out of the forest, and beef, soy and maize are being imported into this country. Most people, while supporting the preservation of sustainable use of forests, do not bother or realise that their consumption is likely affecting climate change in the world. They could buy less damaging and more environmentally friendly products produced in this country. I mentioned the Amazon, but degradation is happening in many places, India, China, Indonesia, and many of the third world countries attempting to modernise. Degradation of the forest and environments due to population increase, especially in the developing world, have already affected those local climates. This is completely accepted as great efforts are made in many countries to replant and replace these degraded environments. But urbanisation continues to increase problems and emissions. When I was a student, it was scientifically established that carbon dioxide was continually increasing as a percentage of the atmosphere, and it was attributed correctly to industrialisation, which is still expanding today in countries such as China and India, which are only recently recognising that their environmentally unfriendly growth is a problem for them as well as us. Of course, it is not just carbon dioxide, but other gases and emissions which have widened the problem. Moving to the council, there is much that can be done easily. It will be interesting how we tackle this issue, as coal, oil and energy still have to be used to make the machinery for wind turbines, and mining uses power to produce friendly technologies, for instance, silver for solar panels, cobalt and nickel for storage batteries, and lithium, which needs purifying quite expensively with energy. We need to be careful to calculate all the power and emissions to each process. With modern technology and methods, it could be possible to achieve carbon neutrality in all its activities by 2030. The challenge will be the financial cost to get there. Certainly in the shorter terms, environmentally friendly technology and techniques will be more expensive. The challenge is how to reach those goals economically and within our budgets. On my own business, I have electricity, producing solar panels and wind turbines on my farm, and we embrace environmentally friendly farming and business practices, such as tree planting, grass strips, insect crops. Modern farming techniques can and do produce less emissions with more efficient engines and use of more friendly pesticides, for instance. And we certainly... and of course, any plastics are recycled in the business. So I look forward to being involved with the processes that we've documented in the new Transport and Environment Committee's remit to carry forward the objectives herein and support this motion's objectives. I'll also say remote working is one of the most beneficial developments come out of COVID, and I would welcome the continuation of this innovative development in the right circumstances. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ogle. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More than welcome this. Declaring a climate emergency is a little bit late, but very, very welcome. Can't disagree with anything that's been said from the leader to everything that's been said so far. But I would ask that we literally do look in, as it says here, just in that one little line, all activities. We ought to be looking at in every committee where we get our supplies from. Again, locally, it saves carbon. It's not transported. And when it comes to what you mentioned, actually doing planting trees, all for that. Can we actually look into and have a policy of, hopefully, when we actually plant trees, we actually go in areas prone to flooding, because the trees themselves, that's a double benefit. So it's not just a benefit of soaking up carbon, it soaks up water. So everything that we actually do can be extremely positive. And when we look into the electrification and electrical vehicles, etc., please don't forget about hydrogen power as well. That's coming along quite nicely. And the infrastructure for that is actually is less. Because the problem with the electric vehicles, and it's a genuine problem, is if you live in a flat, if you live in a block, is where you charge them. So we'll have to actually sort out with nationally as well how we charge vehicles. With some luck, I mean, I think there's great work being done at the moment in what's called aluminium batteries, which will actually store more than lithium, but that's way ahead yet. But we need to actually look at everything. So every committee needs to actually look into its carbon production, its buying policies, its selling policies. And we actually need to look at what land we've got. When we actually look into our assets and our land, is it better to sell them off? Because that makes money. Or is it better to actually keep them and use it for generating through solar panels, through underground heating, whatever? So everything we do, we actually have to have an environmental aspect to it. Because it's not always, money's not everything. The planet is. So if we do have an asset that we could actually use for generating energy, for reducing carbon, let's use that. Sooner have a very long-term positive than a very short-term positive. So yes, totally welcome it. It needs to be looked at every single committee, what they can do to actually enhance it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Bradley, Clark and Adams for bringing this motion forward. I would be happy to support it. But the elephant in the room, the local government pension scheme administrated by Nottinghamshire County Council, the administration of the pension fund is delegated to the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Committee, and according to the website, I note is expressly excluded from the delegation of the authority of the Cabinet. Therefore, I hope this motion will be applied to the pension scheme. As of the 31st of March 2020, the fund was valued at approximately £5 billion, with over 300 contributing employers and 48,000 contributing members. The fund claimed to be, and I quote, a strong supporter of the Paris Agreement on climate change. However, this is where I find a contradiction to that, and of course the motion I really would like to support. Investments are held in oil companies, £8 million in BP, £24 million in Shell, £4 million in a Scandinavian oil refinery, £37 million in BHP. They do the extraction of thermal coal. £28 million in Rio Tinto. You remember last year there was an Aboriginal site, 50,000 years of human heritage and culture. Rio Tinto blew up that site to mine iron ore. In addition, that company has made use of open cast mines and allegedly polluted rivers and streams in Papua New Guinea, Madagascar and Spain, wiping out biodiversity in those areas. These companies do not fit with your motion and they should be disinvested. Other holdings of note include GlaxoSmithKline, £44 million, a top 20 holding of the pension fund. This pharmaceutical is involved heavily in animal testing. The Health and Wellbeing Board may like to know the pension fund invests £18 million in British American Tobacco and a £3.5 million loan to Imperial Tobacco, £23 million in BAE Systems, a weapons producer, £6.5 million in Nestle. If you've seen the news, Nestle are being investigated right here, right now, for modern day child slavery in Africa. These investments have essentially been doubled down on with passive trackers. There's £530 million in a UK tracker, about £300 million in a US tracker. So all these oil caps and mining stocks in coal, you're doubling up the exposure to these assets. We need to get out of these if we support this motion. I've looked at page 47 of the Pension Annual Report 2019-20. It's the latest available. Under the heading Responsible Investment Beliefs, and I quote, it says a strategy of engagement rather than exclusion is more compatible with fiduciary duties and is more supportive of responsible investment. I cannot see how you can positively engage with weapons producers, companies who are allegedly involved in African child slavery and fossil fuels. Further down on page 47 of that report, and I quote, there is a risk but also opportunity
Councillor Waters, you have 30 seconds.
in holding companies which have weak governance of financial, material, environmental, social governance issues. That means you're quite happy to invest in these companies. And has there been stellar performance? No. The return was minus 6.4. You're losing money by investing in these assets. The benchmark has underperformed 4 years out of 5. This can be rectified by the pension committee if they support this motion and look to invest in environmental and sustainable assets. And you can look at the...
Councillor, your time is up.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Sam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you and Councillor Jackson on your new roles. During the recent election campaign, a large number of residents across Newark East told me on the doorsteps that a major priority of theirs is for Nottinghamshire County Council to protect their environment. And I was delighted to be duly elected as the Conservative County Councillor for Newark East, but I was well aware that I'm here to represent all my constituents and not just those who voted for me and my party. And what came across loudly through the ballot box was significant support for the Green agenda. So it is quite appropriate, Mr. Chairman, that my first speech as the County Councillor for Newark East is in support of a motion declaring a climate emergency, and I am proud to inform all my residents of Newark East that this Conservative administration is going green. In truth, the previous Conservative-led administration had a good record on carbon reduction and green initiatives, but maybe it delivered such policies with less fanfare than some other councils, and therefore didn't always get the credit it deserved. As the leader said in his speech, whether these were funded by central government grant or local funding priorities, Nottinghamshire can be proud of £1 million investment in new electric buses, £14 million investment in more than 70,000 LED streetlights that are saving over 70,000 tonnes of carbon and reducing electricity consumption, £4 million in investment in cycle improvement provisions, wildflower highway verges, planting new woodland, investing £2 million in expanding the number of electric vehicle charging points, measures to encourage the use of public transport, and diverting more than 95% of just a few. Mr. Chairman, for my residents in Balderton, Beacon Hill and Newark Town, this Conservative commitment to greener services has resulted in 2 new electric charging sites for them to plug in their cars while they're parked in the Appleton Gate and Riverside car park. It's resulted in extra trees being planted across Newark East that are reducing CO2, generating fresh oxygen and providing nests for wildlife. It's also resulted in £25,000 being invested in the new Newark bus stop improvement scheme for real-time information displays at key bus stops in the town, providing next bus and disruption information, making it far easier and more reliable for my residents to travel by bus rather than cars. And, Mr. Chairman, there are approximately 1,148 streetlights lighting up the streets of Beacon Hill, Newark Town and Balderton, and 660 of these have already been converted to LED, which are more environmentally friendly when compared to traditional sodium lights, and as they use less energy and target the light where it is needed, compared to the larger bulb that throws lights everywhere. These LEDs across Newark East are giving a 60% reduction in energy and carbon compared with the older sodium lighting. I am also pleased to tell you, Mr. Chairman, that it was a Conservative-led county council that constructed the new Newark Orchard School and Day Service in my division, in line with environmentally friendly building standards. This project was completed with individually controlled and timed high-efficiency heating systems, LED lighting with presence detectors and dimming, double glazed windows and doors with sun cooling glazing to prevent thermal gain, exceeding building regulations to limit heat loss, pre-installed electric vehicle charging points, car parks designed to hold water as break from the local watercourse in the event of flooding, and bird and bat boxes to encourage biodiversity. So, Chairman, the task now is to build on what has already been achieved in Newark and across the county and take it to the next level. By declaring a climate emergency, we are recognising the scale and change required for a successful transition to a low-carbon council and local economy. We are recognising that this change needs to go further and faster than it has to date in order for the council to achieve its carbon neutrality in all its services and activities by 2030. This change, Mr. Chairman, needs to be delivered quickly,
30 seconds,
but not
Councillor.
recklessly. This decision and actions must not compromise our ability to deliver services or put public money at excessive risk, but I am confident that as a council we can strike the right balance. A vote for this motion is a vote to declare a climate emergency across Nottinghamshire. It is a vote for the introduction of additional green initiatives for this council to be carbon neutral by 2030, and it is a vote to deliver on the priorities of my residents in Newark East that I am proud to represent. Mr. Chairman, I will be voting for it, and I urge every councillor to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor John Doddy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Some afternoons can drag on a little bit, but this one is, dare I say, warming up quite nicely. Thanks very much, Maureen. I owe you one more. Yes. Yes, I thought to myself, I said, Doddy, I said, don't go wandering off on tangents. I said, try and stick to the point. But once I'd heard Councillor Adams talk about the Wombles, and once I'd heard Councillor Carr talk about his holidays in Vietnam, I knew I would be on safe ground. Climate and the things to do with climate bring us back as far as 1824. Only Maureen will remember that. And a chap called James Fournier recognised that gases going up into the environment would cause what he described as the greenhouse effect. Then over the next 100 years, we had the Industrial Revolution. Great fossils being burnt here, there and everywhere. And people thought that warming up the world would be a good thing. 2 or 3 degrees. You know, it was a cold country. You had to burn all the coal. So the original perception was that it wouldn't necessarily be bad. Then over the next number of years, certainly from the 60s into the Kyoto Agreements of the 70s, it became clear that climate and temperatures rising was going to have a detrimental effect on the planet. And that's why it's so brilliant that we get Councillor Bradley today bringing forward this motion. It's not, as we say, a climate emergency. It's been something that's been recognised for 200 years. So we can call it a climate emergency, but it's not like an emergency. It's not like we hear an ambulance. It's not like we hear a fire brigade. It's not like we see somebody being resuscitated. But it doesn't make it any the less an emergency. But it's going to take time. It's going to take patience. It's going to take the correct decisions. Rushing into decisions will give us collateral damage as opposed to actual benefits. So when I think about the relevant factors for us in terms of climate, you can see globally that you've got rises of things such as fires and things such as droughts and crop failures leading to starvation and debt. But in terms of health and well-being, in terms of health, it's the change in temperature that allows disease, which was typically tropical like a mosquito, to move further north into the more temperate climates and bring with it things such as dengue fever. If we move that to the south of England, to New Hampshire, to the New Forest, and those people who are familiar with Lyme disease, which is carried by deer and wild animals, the tick used to only be able to survive within certain temperatures, but global warming is allowing that to come up and cause Lyme disease and encephalitis, which can cause death. Food poisoning, Campylobacter from poor control of the temperature of poultry, etc. On the expanse, the things that you don't think about but are very, very relevant to the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's been touched on before. Siamese twins, climate change and air pollution. Only this year in London, a coroner said that air pollution was directly responsible or a contributory factor in the death of a 9-year-old girl called Ella. She had asthma attack after asthma attack after asthma attack, went into hospital, eventually had a cardiac arrest and died. It was told that that was down to the air pollution in the area of London in which she lived. Air pollution is a disease of the poor. Air pollution is a disease of those forced to live in areas where there is congestion. Air pollution kills 28,000 people a year, sometimes up to 35. Air pollution clogs up the casualties, 650,000 extra admissions to casualty when the pollution level is high. So from a health and well-being point of view, health is integrally embedded in this motion. Now, it's not just an area that can be dealt with by transport, although we understand that that's a major factor. As the motion mentions, we have to look at it across all of the things.
John, much as I like your eloquence and speaking, your time is actually up. I've been a little bit generous. You've gone over a bit. Can you conclude and sit down, please?
Do I not have a final minute?
You've had over your time already.
Oh,
if I do it for you, I'll have to do it for everybody.
Okay. It's very disappointing. Maureen, what can we do? We've done our best. Anyway, support the motion.
Councillor Fole.
Point of personal clarification, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. 86, Mr. Chairman.
Go on.
Just a point of note, Mr. Chairman, which is meant with great respect. I've noticed you do this on 2 occasions now. When opposition members speak, you cut them dead immediately, and in fact warn them beforehand that their time is running up. Whereas Conservative members, on one occasion you allowed an extra 90 seconds, on that occasion you allowed an extra 45 seconds, and in fact just stated that he could conclude what he was saying. Is that something we can expect for the rest of the time, Mr. Chairman, or can we all be expected to be treated fairly?
Councillor Hollis, I'm guided by the Chief Executive as to time. And when the time is up, or the time is near up, I do issue a warning. On this occasion, Councillor Doddy was on his time when I asked him to conclude, and I will not be giving people licence to go on for several minutes past the time that they normally are allowed in debate. The Chief Executive can confirm that your figures are wrong, according to his stopwatch, and I am guided by him on the top table.
If I may, Chair, Tom, the reason that the Chairman didn't give a warning before the 5 minutes when Councillor Doddy was speaking was because I was distracted. Something was being whispered in my ear, so ordinarily I would have done. On that occasion, I didn't, and I'm consistent in that. But thank you anyway for raising it.
Point of order, Chair. I think because of that, and because of that omission, which was crucial to me getting my speech out.
Councillor Doddy, Councillor, please sit down.
I think it only right that
sit down, please. A good try, but you're not getting away with it. Councillor Fole.
Am I all right to start now? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't go on like that, trust me. Okay. Yeah, very happy to support this motion. I mean, most of us know by now that we really must take action on this and now on climate change. And I think one of the things that struck me about this debate here, and certainly in the Labour group, and I think more broadly, you've got some really interesting expertise in this room, haven't you? So I hope you'll use it in the spirit of kind of, inclusivity and the way that you've described earlier, because I think a lot of us can add quite a lot to this debate and actually bring things to it. As the motions has highlighted, this is the third time a motion calling for carbon neutrality has come to full council in as many years. Both times these came from the Labour group. They were weakened to some extent by Conservative amendments, which is a shame, I think, because what it's done is actually kind of meant that actually we're not quite as far forward as we might have been, but nevertheless, that was the situation. Just to raise one particular thing, One of the areas that was weakened in the motion that was tabled in 2019 was a reporting of environmental and sustainability concerns to committees. At the time, the motion was amended to suggest that the same standard summary paragraph, which appeared on all papers, sufficed as this assessment, but it began to look much more like a cut and paste exercise. It didn't look as if you really meant it. So can this administration assure the Labour Group that as per this new motion, all committees will include a comprehensive assessment of environmental impact in policy decisions? I think it's the kind of thing that Councillor Crean was asking for earlier. Just one thing, just to be perhaps a little bit a question for you. I'm a little bit intrigued. It's interesting to see such a major change in direction for you. Your previous leader, as we know, was a self-confessed climate change sceptic, and we assumed and we believed there was quite a considerable following of that in your group. I just wonder, are all your committee chairs committed to this? Has the whole group changed its view? And just one final point is, again, very happy to support the motion, and I'm glad to have seen a change in direction. It is rather short on detail and strategy. What are the relevant actions you talk about in the motion? Is there a time frame? Is there a budget for it? I mean, declaring a climate change emergency is really good, but what does that actually mean for this council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fall. Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't know I was around 100 years ago. I know I'm knocking on a bit, but that's a bit too far. But I'm delighted John Doddy's been re-elected. He brings light relief to a council meeting every time. Can I just congratulate Councillor Smith, Newark East, on his maiden speech and say what a lucky boy he was. He inherited a very good division, left by ex-Councillor Wallace, who actually achieved quite a lot. So thank you for drawing everybody's attention to it. But other than that, all I can say, Chairman, is have the officers been out and working 24 hours a day and doing all these wonderful things in Newark East? Because if so, I'd like them to come and work 24 hours a day in my division. I'm very happy to support this motion, and in doing so, I shall enjoy it going to your committee, Councillor Clark, of which I shall be a member, and I shall enjoy being able to put comments forward. Jim Cramer touched on it. One of the things that I think this council must understand is if we are going to support Councillor Bradley's motion wholeheartedly, is we have got a lot of spare land. Now, I know my friend who represents Newark West is very keen on generating income for this authority and Newark and Sherwood and all the other authorities if we can share things. Good idea. But at the same time, I don't want us to take over land that belongs to us and share it with the local district council, knock it, whatever's on that land, and knock it down without thinking seriously about this motion. And that means we can't just build willy-nilly on everything and every spare piece of land. We know we need housing. That's for the districts. But at the same time, we need green open spaces. We need to be able to plant trees. We need to be able to give people places to go and get some fresh air, as John Doddy has been telling. It's all about air pollution as well, and about people who suffer from asthma, etc. So can I just ask the mover of the motion to remind his group that yes, by all means, sell, work with, generate, but think about the green open spaces and this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I say, hope you have a good year, ensuing year, and the Vice Chairman as well. And I know that the main person at the back of the chain will be Wendy. So I look forward to meeting her again. It's a long time since I've seen her. Chairman, I just want to reiterate on some of the things, or not reiterate, just to say that there are some important issues raised about the pension scheme here today. And I think that although we as a council, ourselves, our body here, don't have any sort of input directly into it. I think there's a lot of issues there that need sorting out, and people need to heed what was said if they can. I think there are some simple solutions. Councillor Smith, I want to say brilliant, because you're probably the only one today who's not used any paper. You use your laptop for your speech, and we didn't see, like we have with many others, loads of papers, including me here, that we've got. So if we're going to start and do it, let's get rid of some of this. Now, I know that when the laptops were, because I'm old enough to be on this council for some years now, I can remember when laptops were introduced, and the introduction of laptops, at the time, it was said that we would get rid of the paper. It never happened. The paper is still here. It's a little bit thinner, this council book, but we've had thick council books, and we're still producing the paper, so we need to get to grips with that. And that's a small thing. I know it makes it difficult, because we're not set up in the council chamber for charging of the laptops. And to me, that was ridiculous when it was refurbished. There was no connection points put in for recharging laptops, etc. And even today, one of the reasons why I've not got my laptop out, because I always use that nowadays, is because there's no charging point. So we need to look at making that, more usable, and get rid of the paper. Get rid of it. We don't need it. We all get the minutes sent out. The other issue, Chairman, is relating, and it was brought up earlier by one of your colleagues, is remote working. The amount of money we must have saved during the pandemic, we're not travelling to and from meetings, but we still conducted the authority's business. And it's back to you, Ben, as MP. Clearly, the government have put in the legislation to allow that remote working to work, but now it's been rescinded, and we've all got to come back together. Now, I think for the full council meeting that we should do this, but I think some of the other meetings, because a lot of the public can now access. In fact, it's become more accessible to the public than what it is at County Hall, because how many people do you know turn up to County Hall, and how many have turned up to here today, to the meeting? Our colleagues came from Mansfield who come to most full council meetings, the honorary aldermen, but there are very few others that actually turn up to the meeting. But the only way we can change that is by government legislation, and I just think that in reality that needs to be done. So they're the only points. I think we've got to start looking at what we do ourselves and internally. The other one is about schools. I know Veolia do quite a bit of work within schools, but I think a lot more could be done. And I know we can say a lot of children these days, if you talk to them about it, they're very clued up. But there are still issues where you see litter, people throwing things about, and that's something that is drilled into you. It was drilled into me when I was a kid. I used to walk home with litter. My mum used to, when she was washing my trousers on, I would make sure, because she knew that there'd always be some paper, because we've been brought up that you do not throw litter on the floor. If you haven't got anywhere, you put it in your pocket, you bring it home. Now, it doesn't seem to happen naturally these days. So I think a lot of work of what we could do, working a little bit more with Veolia and getting into schools, as opposed to saying, well, you come and just look at the system there, which is what happens. They have to go to Mansfield, to the recycling centres and whatever. What we should be doing is actually getting into the school, through the school doors, because that's easier sometimes for the schools. Thank you, Chairman. It's an important issue and we've got to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Guilfoyle. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think past members will certainly know that our group has consistently been outspoken on this issue, but me personally, particularly. And certainly it's extremely welcome that the new administration, the new Conservative administration has, I'll try and avoid the term that Councillor Lawton doesn't like, but certainly about turned on a very vocal council leader that denied climate change was even in existence, never mind was prepared to put pen to paper to do something about it. So certainly it's very welcome that this council now is saying we have a climate emergency. However, I remain sceptical about actually the delivery. I think the analogy I think I'd certainly use is we're in an emergency, we need to get somewhere, we've not got in the car, we've got in the old person's mobility scooter, and I think that's the emergency vehicle we need to get there in. And I think certainly that's what I'm worried about, as I think Councillor Goland and Councillor Pringle certainly spoke well about. And I think we're quite right. You know, I quite rightly say as an opposition member we support what you're saying, but as I think Councillor Kerry will make clear to Conservative members, when it's come to things like the pension fund, Conservative members have consistently said they support climate change. Well, it's taken a number of sessions in the pension fund to even acknowledge that it was a problem, but when they did, the proof wasn't in the pudding. You know, Councillor Waters is very able and very ably understands the stock market and our investments as a council, because although it is the pension fund and we'll all acknowledge it sits separately, the Constitution still reads Cabinet, by the way, not the committee chairs. That certainly needs altering. But our pension fund does fund all the things this motion says that we shouldn't be doing, and that's our money, that's our employees' money, that's Ashfield District Council's employees, the fire fund, the fire authority, the police officers' pension fund, all the public services are going to pay for the things that we don't, in this motion, say we don't believe in. And frankly, as Councillor Waters very ably said, and we'll quite happily share all the information in detail so members can digest it in their own time, we've actually lost money by investing our taxpayers' pounds, in bad investments that damage the environment and don't sit with the principles of a local council. And I think at this point I'll pause what I'm going to say there and just address Councillor Girling's operation. I would encourage Councillor Girling to remember that when he is sat in this chamber, he isn't Keith Girling, and to come out with outbursts that investing in ammunition and arms isn't a problem. If a Nottinghamshire County Council paid for bullet ends up in a 12-year-old in a war somewhere in the world, it's not appropriate. So I think certainly I'm at the other end of the chamber and I heard what you said. I would encourage you not to repeat it on a recorded microphone as a representative of the county council. But you're perfectly entitled to your own opinion. But certainly when we say things like arms, that bullet kills somebody. But when we say things like climate change, that kills people as well. And we all only have to look out the windows only last month to see the rainfall we had in May in the UK. That's down to the climate emergency. It's happening now. It is happening now. And Councillor Pringle and I have worked very closely on the pension fund, and it's clear that now ethos is coming here. But as all the councillors have said, I really hope this isn't just words. And it's disappointing not to see any things like, what can we measure it by? Ashfield Council's promised to plant 1,000 trees. We've nearly done that. Why aren't the county council planting 10,000? You've got far more land. Well, why? Where's the stuff in it?
30 seconds, Councillor Hollis.
Where's the fact that you look in these reports and we look at financial things and where it affects divisions? Why isn't there a climate line in that? In every single thing we put to this council. Stuff that opposition members can track and measure what you're saying. But broadly, Mr. Chairman, I support where this council's moving. I would encourage members that are passionate about it, like Councillor Smith and the new Vice Chairman of the Environment Committee and Highways, to actually run fast and treat this as an emergency and not a slow-burning ember. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis. Councillor Mike Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. And just a couple of things to pick up on Councillor Hollis mentioned there about the rainfall. Let's not get confused between climate and weather. And yesterday was weather. Sustained, extended periods of severe temperature change and severe rainfall are classed as climate. So let's not make that confusion early on. Councillor Doddy's point around the emergency, I take a slightly different view than you in a way. Only that, I agree we should have a shock effect about what's happening, but I also agree with you it's been going on for a very long time. And there's been a lot of misconceptions about climate over the years, whether that be nuclear, which was portrayed as an awful, terrible generation of energy back in the days gone by, and in fact damaged the green movement for a number of years as a result of that, because of the misconceptions around the use of nuclear fission. And so I suppose what I really want to say today is around the climate emergency. I'm trying to get my laptop to work, and that's the only thing when you take away paper. Sometimes you can't get your laptop to go back on again. But yeah, so I think the main things... Oh, do you know what? Let's just forget about that. So we talked about climate. So I think what's really important about this is we've done a lot of lines in the sand today, and I think and that's fantastic. And I think that's where we need to be. I think we all need to be talking about a new way of doing things, a better way of doing things. And I think although we might change our views about the semantics necessarily of what we are doing and what we aren't doing, I don't think the actual things that we need to do are really the things we need to talk about today. We need to all get together and we need to all agree we need to change. And we need to all agree we need to change for the whole of the county, for all of us. For our kids, for everybody we care about. We've got to do things in this council that really change the future of our area. And there are small things that can happen in councils. I mean, you did make a good point around paper, but like I said, like we've seen it can fail sometimes. But I think as well that there's a lot of work we can do around investigating emerging technologies, and whether that be, somebody mentioned hydrogen. I can't remember who mentioned hydrogen. It might have been, Councillor Creamer, thank you. Hydrogen not only is used as a potential power for cars, but it's also used in independent generation of electric energy. So you could have a hydrogen power plant in a remote location creating energy for electric cars. So hydrogen's use...
Would you like your speech, Councillor?
Oh, thank you so much. Paper. Thank you. And a good point about paper, just while we're on it, is that, what's interesting about paper, and again, I don't know if you do know this, but the plastic bag was invented in order to prevent the use of paper. And obviously we can see and something that Councillor Doddy mentioned about doing things too quickly and the damage that doing things too quickly can have. That's a prime example of it. The plastic bag was invented by a man who went out with, good intentions to remove our reliance on paper and the damage to the rainforest that Councillor Ogle mentioned. And by doing that, he created one of the biggest problems we've got in the entire world today. But the intentions were good. And the great thing about paper is that we can actually regrow it. So even though it may be problematic, we've got to ensure that we're not damaging huge swathes of rainforest, but we've got to do it in a managed way. We're going to use it sustainably. Exactly right, spot on. Just going back to this for a second about the planet, and I don't really want to use the planet as being the focus of this, because the planet is a thing that's been affected, as John rightly pointed out, by meteor strikes, by shivering ice ages, and changes, from early meagre beginnings. But the Earth is pretty much, the planet itself is guaranteed for at least a couple of billion years until it eventually lands in the sun. None of us will see that day. But the point is, it's not the planet that's at risk, it's human species, ourselves, our families, they're what's risk. We are damaging the Earth to
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. We're creating the conditions to damage our own species. That's where we're at. We're not, the planet itself, like I say, will exist as a rock for another 2 billion years, but our ability to live on that rock is damaging every day that we don't get this right. So let's all come together. Let's pull all of our ideas. Every time you've sat in a traffic and you've thought, oh, that's a good idea, let's bring those together as a group and let's make a real change that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise to support this motion, and it was a pleasant surprise when I opened my council papers and saw this motion, because I have thought for a number of years now that there's actually quite a few people on the Conservative benches that are actually very, very concerned about the climate and about the climate emergency. And there are two reasons why I say that. First of all, in 2019, the Broxtowe Borough Council declared a climate emergency, and the Conservative opposition supported it. But I have to say, as I've used this word already before, what a broom has come across the Conservative group, because I have to say, I don't think at the last council meeting we would have ever have seen a motion like this from the Conservative group. So I think we perhaps all know where the problem lay. So I welcome this. I certainly welcome the language now that we are going to do this by 2030 and not by 2030 or as soon as possible. That's absolutely fantastic. We do need to get to grips with the pension. Now, I'm not at all certain what is going off with the pension fund, and I would actually welcome a report to whatever committee, possibly, after the pension committee, to actually detail what the investments are and what we can do about it, more importantly, because I think that is important. We can do all this, and Broxtowe can do all this at the same time with our climate emergency, but if we are investing in fossil fuel companies that are damaging the environment, then it makes us look stupid, quite frankly, and we shouldn't be in that position. And also with regards to delivery, Tom, that's up to us as an opposition, isn't it, to make sure that this is delivered, and I'm sure it will be, because we'll all be scrutinising it and we'll be coming up with ideas, which I'm sure, because this is globally important and it's important to every council in this room, we all want this to work. We all want this to work. So I am over the moon that this is on the agenda today. And I would say, if you do want to have a look at a strategy, then I would recommend Broxtowe Borough Council's climate change strategy. It is available on the website, but don't try and download it because it's about 230 pages long. And but there are some absolutely fantastic ideas and actions in there that could be plagiarised. I think plagiarism is allowed when we're trying to save the planet. And I thank you for bringing this motion forward, and I will wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Girling.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I won't be long. First of all, I was just going to stand up and talk about what my committee does in terms of the environment and the climate change agenda. However, I'm just going to talk about bullets. Having been somebody that stood with bullets, not firing at children, but preventing children from being shot, I find your comments offensive. If it wasn't for companies like BEA, people like me would still have to stand on the front line, putting their lives at risk, where now we've got technology to be able to protect this country in a way we don't put people's lives at risk. So I find that really offensive, and they're not bullets, they're rounds. And if you knew anything about standing and risking your life, you'd know that. Anyway, I'll now get on to the good bit. Maureen, I always love it when you tell me what to do. I love it, because sometimes I ignore it, but sometimes I do actually do it. And I'm just going to say now, as the chairman of the Economic Development and Asset Management Committee, I'm the big cheese. Edam? Yeah, the big, oh, okay, waste of time. Okay. Come on. I know I had a go at him, but, you know, that's gone. Let's move on. Yeah, and Jim, you said about looking at PV panels. We're already doing it. I've already instructed the committee officers to get on with that, to look at what land we've got, where we can start putting those in place so that we can start generating power, green power, carbon neutral power, and get some money for it as well, to sweat the assets. Maureen, there will be things I have to sell, because we do need the money. We've got a 151 officer over there relying on me to sell assets, to give him more money so that he can balance the books. Yeah, so it's a balance. But I'll be looking very seriously at what we can do to reduce the carbon footprint in terms of the land and properties that we've got, yeah, and actually use them the best way we possibly can. That's why I have written to all the district councillors in the Economic Development Committee, so we can look at what they do, sweat the assets properly, get the most money we can, but also do the best we can to reduce our carbon. So I'll give you that as my guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Zadrozny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I rise in support of the motion, and there are a huge number of important points already been made, which I don't intend to boil the cabbage twice, Mr. Chairman. But I think there are some things that are worth reiterating. I think my very erudite colleague, Councillor Waters, mentioned a lot of stuff, and unfortunately was cut off in his prime. And I think there's a huge concern that the agenda here is more than a green lanyard and a green front cover. It needs to be something tangible, and it needs to be cross-cutting throughout the authority. And particularly, I think we clearly have concerns about the pension fund, and I appreciate that there's a strategy, albeit a loose one, but I don't hold truck with the we will be able to change BP by being part of them. I just think that's twaddle. I think we have to make a stand by saying it's not even a good investment. As Councillor Waters said, who this is his job, we are losing money on things that we disagree with doing. It's just a no-brainer that we'd look at stuff that makes money and sticks with our core values and beliefs. And I think clearly we are all moving towards a much more united front in terms of this agenda, and it's a massive agenda. It's not, there's been so many facets to it today, and even Notts Wildlife Trust emailed me the other day that they think there's a wildlife emergency akin to this. Well, I'm going to sneeze. Mr. Chairman, I think the bit that concerns me is I think it was Councillor Fowle who said we need to see the parallel plan, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what the appropriate committee develops, how robust that is, whether it's financed, whether it's resourced, whether it's prioritised. As Councillor Hollis said, Ashfield District Council, on every single committee report, on every cabinet report, where it says union comments, financial implications, we have environmental impact comments as well on everything to see if there is a problem or if it can be offset or anything else. And we look at that, we take it that seriously. And I knew you were shouting, well, we're planting 2 million trees. I think we need to talk about what we're doing in Nottinghamshire. What are we doing on Rufford Park? What are we doing at Newstead Abbey? Or what were we doing on the places where we have some sway and influence? We said we were going to plant 1,000 trees over the 4 years. We planted 1,000 trees over the last 4 months. We're a small district council. working together, you can talk about a big impact. So those are the things I really am looking forward to seeing coming out of the agenda, because, we all remember, I think it's 2008, 2009, David Kowski's. It was a photo shoot. This can't be a photo shoot moment anymore. It needs to be something that we take seriously. And again, I believe that's in that that you genuinely mean that, but we need to see that comes forward. My only point, I think, is about the reporting back that's to full council periodically, and I do want to see that firmed up at some point. When is it? Is it quarterly? Is it biannually? Does it come to policy committee? Are you giving that committee a cross-cutting remit across the council to go into every department and say what impacts are you having, or what way can you benefit this agenda? And they're the things I think we hope to see fall out of this motion, because there's an enormous amount to it, and in the spirit it's intended, Mr. Chairman, of course my group are supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Neil Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm very aware that time is very short, so there's still another very important motion to go through. So I'm not going to go through the list of responses I was going to, just a few very quick responses. And budgets, obviously, is a very important thing, and it is a question of having to use money and invest to save. Certainly, Councillor Creamer raised the point about cutting across all activities, across all committees, and I very much believe that that's one of the standard things in the reports of all committees that should be done. How are we addressing climate change and all we're doing in the environment on every committee activity? Councillor Fowle asked about the detail. Well, yes, she's right, but actually in the motion, bottom of the last major paragraph, bottom of page 3, it talks about the delegation to Transport and Environment Committee and agreeing and overseeing appropriate measures. So, excuse me. So I'm sure that's where the detail will start to come forward. Councillor Girling is responsible for land and assets, and it's going to be whatever is appropriate. We've got to get that balance that he talked about. In terms of buses, we are still one of the best performing authorities for bus services, encouraging people away from cars. So if only, and we need to work towards this, that all those buses were zero emission, whether it's electric, whether it's hydrogen, and whatever. In terms of remote working, and that is a question where COVID has given us opportunities, and necessity is the mother of invention. We're finding different ways of doing things, and that's given us that opportunity to look at the way we are helping to adjust the way we consume energy. The only other thing I'll just quickly mention, just to show that I've already started putting things or wheels in motion, if that's not too much of a pun. I'll be attending a conference in September on electric charging infrastructure. So, we've already started looking at new ways. So I'm very happy that the Transport and Environment Committee has been charged with taking the lead on this. And this is something, as in the previous motion, I'm sure we can all work together, Mr. Chairman, and let's help each other and let's help save energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Bradley, do you wish to respond?
Only to thank members for their support for this motion. We've heard everything that's been said. Councillor Clark will crack on his committee, take all of that on board, and we'll report back in due course. But I think we need to crack on and vote, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradley. Can we move to the vote then? All those in favour? Anyone against? I'd say that's unanimous then. Motion is carried unanimously. We move on then to the last motion, and I call upon Councillor Ben Bradley to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can continue in that theme of unanimity. I'll move the motion and then crack straight on with my remarks. I want to move a motion that reads, this council agrees to establish a cross-party highways review panel to be led by the Chairman of Transport and Environment Committee with a remit to examine the current methods and technologies used to repair and maintain roads across Nottinghamshire. The panel will consider whether additional or different approaches can be adopted to deliver maximum value from this council's significant extra and ongoing investment in highways maintenance. The panel will report its recommendations as soon as possible to the Policy Committee for final consideration and decisions. I think we can all agree on this particular motion in the Chamber here today. I certainly hope so. Having spent weeks and months talking to the electorate during the last election in a COVID-safe and socially distanced fashion, of course, but the biggest issue raised on the doorstep and in any communications was our roads and pavements. It was potholes, it was road maintenance, it was particularly some of the techniques and practices used in the repair of roads. And we've heard that already from some of the speeches made by members earlier on today. Unlike many other services where residents access them as and when they need them, but very often people aren't engaged with them regularly or personally, the road network affects almost everyone and is seen and used in some ways by pretty much all of our residents. We also know that at this time of year, with the impacts of poor weather on road services, that reports and problems with maintenance tend to peak, and it rises up the list of residents' concerns. All of us will have examples of issues raised with us where local people or even ourselves as councillors have been unhappy with the response or work in some way, whether that's the quality of a repair, whether it's techniques involved, policies as to how it's managed. There's been a particular challenge about the way we carry about our temporary emergency repairs, which I think we all would recognise. It's important to say, because there's a lot of criticism that flies around in this area, it's not for lack of investment in recent years, and it's not criticism aimed at the efforts of frontline staff. Staff out there repairing and maintaining our roads are following the policies set by this council and by VIA. So the responsibility lies up the chain with us to get this right. The last administration invested an extra 24 million of capital money into our roads and undertook a great many more repairs each year than previous administrations. They made huge efforts to try and catch up on what is a very long-term problem. But it's clear from the election feedback that residents haven't felt enough improvement from that, and their perceptions of our road network haven't changed significantly. So rather than simply throwing more money at a system that we're told is not working, one of the first actions for this administration will be to go back to brass tacks here, to look at the policies on how we implement and manage our responsibilities on road maintenance. We're going to look at our duties, our policies, the organisations involved, the techniques, the materials that we use, the equipment, the way we manage priorities. We'll look at what we measure and why in terms of our performance to make sure we're tracking it properly. We're going to look at it all, and we're going to get this right so that residents' money is put to good use. Now, that's not to say, and it's important to say, that we can fix everything overnight, far from it, because this is not a new issue. It's not one that's appeared in the last 6 months or 6 years. It goes back decades, and it will take time and it will take investment to fix. But residents quite rightly expect us to listen to their concerns and to take action to make improvements. I'm determined that over the coming years, Nottinghamshire residents must see improvement in the way that we do this work. The review will be done on a cross-party basis. It will be open to ideas from all sides of the chamber, and I've already spoken to some colleagues from other parties about their thoughts on this. I welcome, and I know the chairman of the committee will welcome your thoughts and feedback, particularly constructive ideas, particularly examples of good practice that we can look at and learn from. It will be wide-ranging. It will report back to policy committee with recommendations for us to consider. The chairman of the Transport and Environment Committee will oversee the process and work with officers to set the terms of reference for the inquiry over the coming weeks. And I hope that councillors will engage with it in a meaningful way, recognising our duty to work together to improve outcome for residents and recognising the feedback that we've all had through the election that this is something that we need to do better.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Call upon Councillor Neil Clark to second the motion.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy and have great pleasure in seconding the motion. I was going to reserve the right to speak, but in view of the time, I'm going to speak now, Mr. Chairman, because obviously we've only got half an hour to go. So, as the leader has already said, this is and was and still remains a big issue on the doorstep, and I hope we're not all going to recount all our stories of all roads that need repairing, because we all know that there is still work to be done. But this motion does demonstrate that we are listening to our residents, and also we're also demonstrating that we are ready to act and to do something. It's not a new issue, Mr. Chairman, but it is a huge issue, and by its nature is constantly in the public eye, and probably one of the most high-profile issues, because every resident in Nottinghamshire probably looks at a road every day of the week. I do have to obviously give a little word of caution. We do need to manage expectations, because not every road and every pothole is going to be repaired by tomorrow morning, or even by next week. We've got to be realistic. But I promise Councillor Dobson that we will actually include her division as well, so because she likes telling me off by the sound of it. However, it is perfectly valid to ask lots of questions, and that's what I hope this review is going to be doing. Questions like, are we doing this the most efficient way? Is there a better way? Are we using the latest innovation? We've already heard, there are new ways of working. There are many, many more questions, and there are even some of the stupid questions we can ask, and the very basic question, why? Why are we doing it that way? Is there a better way of doing it? As the leader has already intimated, it needs to be cross-party. It is going to be cross-party because we need that spirit of cooperation, because this is a county-wide problem that we all need to work together for the sake of the residents of Nottinghamshire, which is why we do need to work together. And the membership of the panel will be agreed by the group business managers, but I stress again the important thing, it is cross-party. There will be a report coming to the first committee of the Transport and Environment Committee, which is on the 15th of June, where we will be agreeing the scope and the terms of reference, and it will also include external input to assist with the review, and that will also allow us to talk to other people to see if there are ways in which they are doing things that are better. Why reinvent the wheel when maybe somebody else has already invented it. This is high on the residents' list. We've got to be seen to be acting, and this motion gets that need going. We need to get it right, and let's get on with it, Mr. Chairman, and let's agree it. I don't think we need to go through a whole list of members' problems on roads. We know that it needs sorting, so let's get on with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Ogle.
Thank you. Just need to set the scene for the cross-party working chairman, which I'll try and do as quickly as possible. I do remember only about, I think it was about 40 or 50 years ago, when I was about 6, my mother proudly told me that Nottinghamshire roads were the best in the country. And this was something of an admission, as my mother was a Yorkshire lass. So the deterioration in the roads to the sad state they were in the last few years is a story of continuing decline. I share your concern. I would like to work with you to obtain an improvement. Extra finance, as has been said, has been directed into repair. However, there is a general consensus that the roads and the repairs are unacceptable, as has already been said. Most importantly, our constituents in our communities are dissatisfied. So what are we after? I'll say we're looking for quality. Quality repairs, quality refurbishment and safety on our roads, and the improvement to that standard. It is undisputed that the best roads in the United Kingdom are in Scotland, even the rural unclassified roads. Westminster appears paralysed by the West Lothian question, robbed by the Barnet formula, while the Scottish nationalists extract the Danegeld, encouraged by English appeasement. If Notts had half the extra public expenditure that Scotland gets, we would be struggling to spend it all. Barnett himself said that his policy was short-term and was not a fair long-term solution. Well, I refocus on our roads again. For new councillors, the main areas of public concern and criticism are the worn-out areas and potholes that are filled by seal patching and VFX, and the quality of the work that is done. It does create a rough surface for vehicles, and the old tarmac around the plug often comes out, as often been said in this chamber. So there is no doubt, I agree with you, that areas such as this are worn out if there's a lot of that. And they need to be caught before they get to this stage. While area patching is used, the public do not often notice that it has been done because they appear to be satisfied with the patching that I can see. The seal patching, this is the VFX, it does prevent serious injury to cyclists and reduces damage to vehicles when installed properly. And you've got to decide, you know, what you're going to do if you're not going to use that. The value of the claims against the county council is actually dropping because of the seal patching does actually fill the hole. Also, the micro-asphalting leaves a lot of loose gravel, which is often not acceptable, and you can ask for that to be swept up in your own areas. So among many areas for you to investigate is how we can reduce that seal patching and use less VFX. In this year, in fact only a few months ago, an important new position of Highways Drainage Officer was activated, and he is to tackle the backlog of culvert and highway chamber blockages, and he is making progress. The investment will make the roads safer and incidentally should reduce flooding, as a lot of flooding is caused by accumulated highway drainage issues. Pavements are clearly, as has been raised today, another area for investigation and improvement. In tune with motion 2 and 3, it will be appropriate to look at environmentally friendly materials, ways of working, and providing the services, also what VIA provide. I am already investigating, because I've done a little bit of research, whether structural issues are affecting the quality of the roads and by how much. We're also looking at how water affects the roads and where the drainage is
30
adequate.
seconds, Councillor Ogle.
How long? As Vice Chairman of this Council's proposed review, I look forward to working with you all, and we need to extract the maximum value from the current budget, achieve the best value for the significant additional funding that this administration is to make available for the benefit of the people and to improve the quality of the roads. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ogle. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak on this issue. Also, I thank Councillor Ben Bradley, the MP, and the Councillor Neil Clark, MBE, for bringing it forward, because something has to be done urgently about this problem. Can I say, first of all, that potholes, as we all know, seems to be one of the top issues at present, and it's for this authority to get a grip of. There's no doubt about that. Having already walked the whole of my ward since the election, every street, I have found out the reason why so much of the problem seems to be reoccurring in the same spots. Of the 20 roads in my ward that I will be sending in to need remedial work, most of the problem areas have a patchwork quilt preparation with the substance used dropped into the hole and stamped down. Within weeks, the hole reappears and needs further repair. What needs to happen is every pothole needs to be cut out and prepared correctly. I know that it is costly, but I know that we have now got a machine costing £1.1 million that will do the repairs 4 times as quick as it normally happens. Why don't we lease a number of these machines so we can catch up on these road repairs, and then we can let them go again and after we have caught up and got some of the main roads all done correctly. And that's one of the issues that I think we can really get hold of. As I say, within weeks at the moment, the hole reappears, and it's because the rain comes into it and it gets in round the side of it, etc., 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 and we have real problems. Mr. Chairman, I will support anything that will improve the situation at present. Our residents out there are screaming at us to do a better job, but let me tell you, the workforce of this authority is magnificent. They only do the jobs that are told they've got to do, and it's their leaders that tell them exactly what they've got to do, and sometimes it isn't right. But that's the situation. And as I say, I support any issue, and I'm available if you wish anyone to come on the committee. I know a little bit about these road repairs and etc., and I would like to give you a little bit of my expertise if it's possible. Thank you very much.
Members, I will be using a little bit of discretion, and I will conclude the motion debate at 5:45, as I need to be away. And I will therefore ask Councillor Bradley to sum up at 5:35. We have 5 more speakers. There's no point in putting your hand up, Councillor Zodi. I doubt whether we'll get to you. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an important issue, and it did rear its head, obviously, during the elections when more people were out there, in particular in Bassetlaw, because they did a chart saying we'd failed as councillors to report potholes. Clearly, there couldn't have been any in Retford West because they'd done a Freedom of Information report on it and found out I'd reported the most in Bassetlaw, so I was very happy with that, although I failed. I don't know what the others have done. Retford East and Tuxford and Retford West have not really reported any, so clearly they've not got a problem, so it can't be as bad as all that. But seriously, it is, and we know it is. From my point of view, though, when you're looking at the terms and reference and the scope, one of the things that I'm concerned about is not just the carriageway. People know I don't drive. I am concerned about that. What I am concerned about is the footpaths. And when you're talking about, the fact that we're very good at providing buses to get about, clearly, though, it's about getting from your property to the bus stop in a safe and efficient manner. And clearly, at the same time as the poor degradation of some of the roads. Some of the footpaths are appalling. And I know I've sort of asked, because when I've reported things, some have been done, some haven't, and I've asked officers to give me an indication as to why. What's the difference between you do that, but you don't do that? You know, and I think we've all got to understand that on why certain paths are done and certain paths are not. Yet, in my eyes, they both look as though they both needed repair. So I would hope within the terms of reference and the scope that you're actually going to put footpaths in, because I don't believe that the County Council, I think it was only about £1 million, was it last year or whatever, over the few years that we spend on footpath repairs in totality. And it's not enough. And I know that that's the balance between do we do the roads, and it does seem that road users have a bigger voice and always do. But clearly, you know, there's a lot of people out who use our, and one of my colleagues when we were talking about it, talked about the equality issues that are there for people using footpaths, you know, the disabled people. Or ride in their wheelchair because of the standard of the footpath. So I hope it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Guilfoyle. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I was actually going to make the same point. The motion mentions highways. I believe, I might be wrong, that actually does include the pavements. There's been very little talk about pavements or indeed cycleways in this discussion. Could you confirm, please, that includes pavements?
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. We're on a theme here. Yeah, I was raising the point of highways, particularly in my division and Errol's division. It's a very, very illy division. And the footpaths themselves, the ones that are particularly bad, are near the shopping centres. Part of the reason for that is the amount of mobility scooters that are being used now. We're going to have mobility scooters being increasingly used in our area because of the hills itself. It's when people want to get to the shops, it's a good thing they can actually get now. But at the same time, it does wear out the pavement. We're going to have e-scooters quite possibly, going by the looks of what's happening in the city with their experiment. We've certainly got them illegal. So within the scope, again, I'd like to actually see specifically mentioned highways when it actually comes to scoping. It's not in it on the highways bit, pavements. Because I think perhaps not just the wear and the potholes and the bumps in the pavement, we're going to have to look at the state of the pavements for the future, because they're going to get that extra wear. Those mobility scooters aren't light. And in fact, those actually e-scooters, if they appear, which they're not supposed to use on the pavement, but how many people do you see on the pavement rather than the road? They're about twice, 3 times heavier than the push bike. So they're creating wear with smaller wheels, creating. So I'd like the scope to actually look into as well footpaths very seriously, and particularly in hilly divisions, because we have one of the hilliest divisions in the whole of the county. It's very difficult when it snows and all the rest of it, regardless of any other issues. People are trapped in their homes. So when they get the chance to go out, if they're disabled, if they need a scooters, if they need wheelchairs, it's good for them to get out. And having the pavements in a bad state doesn't help that. So just on the scope, when you actually do the scoping, please include the actual pavements, not just for the damage now, but for possible future needs with the extra wear they're going to get.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a subject of this last election. It's a red hot topic, and we all know that really it's about budget, and we simply haven't got enough money to fix the problem, and we have to be better at what we do with the money we've got. That's the main issue. VFX, we're caught between a rock and a hard place. And the rock and the hard place is that once that pothole's been reported, it's got to be repaired. And that's the crux of the matter. It's the way in which we repair them. When you get somebody who pulls up in a transit van and chucks a bag of tarmac in that hole, rolls over it with his van, rides off down the road and sits and has a fag and a sandwich for longer than it took to chuck that bag in, that's the problem. We've got a real bad public image. And in the building trade, you're only as good as your last job. And we are not any good at fixing potholes with VFX. It's the way we do it. And that's what's got to change. And the other thing that's got to change is how we tell the public where the money comes from. Everybody seems to believe that road car tax is spent on our pothole repairs. And Most certainly not, because Highways England. There's a misconception. And everybody who sees a vehicle pull up wherever it is in any division across the whole of the county, anybody who sees somebody pull up and drop a bag of Airfix and then roll over it, or not even roll over it, just leave it as it is and drive off, that's the image. That's what's tarnishing the image of this council. It's the way in which we do it. We had a committee over the last 4 years, Communities in Place Development and Review, that looked into every nitty-gritty. It was an excellent committee, and I hope this committee and this panel that follows on in the same vein as that. And the machine that John Wilmot was talking about, the 1.3 million Dragon that we invested in, is doing its job, but it's got a long way to go, and it's got a lot to catch up with. And as for pavements, again, it's a budgetary thing. We just don't do enough of them, you know. And there are more people using Motability scooters, and that's making it even worse, because that impacts on the claims on this council as much as potholes does. And climate change, funnily enough, is another thing that's exacerbating the problem, because when we get heavy rain in the winter followed by frost, we get many more potholes and they breed. But it's the way in which we fix them. That's the way we've got to look at it, and how we tell people we're going to fix them, and the public information that we give out on how we're going to continue forward. That's the main thing, because public perception of this council fixing potholes and roads is very poor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Fole.
Thank you. Well, it's really good to see that Councillors Bradley and Clark admit that highways review is needed. It's very welcome. Our highways, roads and pavements are in a terrible state, and have got a lot worse over the last few years. And pedestrians are really suffering on a daily basis as a result of people just described. So happy to support the motion, but again, it's a bit short on detail. What will the membership of the panel actually look like? What is its status and remit in more detail? And will there be resources available? And we've already talked about budget. When it's come to a conclusion, what are the timescales? You talk about reporting back as soon as possible. What does that mean? And how will success be measured? Also, this motion refers just to examining current methods and technologies, but how about a consideration of how the broader strategy and management of highways, could that be part of this too? I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but sort of highways officers are doing a fantastic job. They really listen, they do their very best, they get back to you quickly. But it just feels to me like the criteria they're working to in terms of the jobs they prioritise doesn't reflect my priorities, nor that of my residents quite often. I know, Ben, you mentioned about looking at priorities, and I think that's really important. We do need to look at priorities. They need to reflect what our residents want, not necessarily kind of some of the kind of priority that's not directly relevant to the way people kind of live their lives. So we'll support the motion, but please can we have some real action? And please can it come out of this panel quickly? And because if it doesn't, and we're happy to be a membership of this panel, very happy, and we're glad that it's cross-party, but if really it is just a talking shop, then we will pull out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fole. As members have been brief, I think Councillor Zarodny indicated he wanted to speak. In the spirit of cooperation,
Now then, leave him alive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's very generous. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I intend to be just as brief. There are a couple of quick points, and I certainly don't intend to go over every pothole or road defect. There are a couple of points I think would be useful for the committee to look at. One of which is Hucknall, which a couple of decades ago, or more than that, Hucknall and many of the roads, as you'll know, were a trial area for concrete roads. And then they were skimmed with about 1/4 of an inch of tarmac. And the resurfacing of those properly is going to be a major problem. It's a different area to anywhere else in the county. So just to put a flag in that probably need a different programme to look at. Secondly, this is one of the, again, have you got a button? I can see you doing something to show it off. It's got a magic button. Is it? That one's. I bet you all have. This is one of the things where we're going to say take this back to government. But I recall, obviously, we keep getting different chunks of funding from government to give us a bit of pothole funding. I recall, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we got a chunk of funding to resurface pavements, specifically footways, where it would help encourage exercise. And so in Eastwood Division, I can't see Councillor Cubley, but in Eastwood Division, then they resurfaced the pavements on Queen's Road to the chip shop. Just in case people can't hear me. No. Now look. So all I meant about that point was that when government funding comes for specific projects, and it's very, very welcome, that you might say the ring fences around it sometimes are a bit challenging, and obviously we want to be as creative as we can. I forgot my point. What was that? There were 25. Oh, so the last one, Mr. Chairman, thank you, is similar to Councillor Foll's point about the group. I'm very much supportive of it. I do think, as I said to you in private, it needs to be an intense piece of work, obviously, if you want it to report back fast. So I think it'll be quite an onerous piece of work, which we're very happy to engage in and put ideas in and feed into. I'm much more interested in the Constitution, because in this new all loving about whether it's going to be politically balanced or not. And you've said a number of times cross-party, nobody's said politically balanced. And has it been a panel, not a working group, and a panel, not a committee? Those things just prickle your deviousness with me a little bit. So I'd just like to know that we're going to be included properly, that's all. And of course, it's very difficult for unaligned members, but for them to have a mechanism to feed in as well, because I think we've all, as you said, somebody said, I think you, Ben, 66 brains about the one. If there's a mechanism for everybody to feed in, obviously we'll have that through the group structure, but there are other members who have got good ideas to feed in as well. I just welcome some clarity on how that's going to function. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leniency. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Rodney. Can I ask Councillor Bradley to respond?
Thank you, Chairman. We might even finish on time, which is fabulous. We could always be quicker, and maybe we'll try to be quicker in future. Welcome the reaction from members in the room. Really important, I think, and a key priority for all of us to deliver on this. I recognise that it needs to be an intensive piece of work, and we need to do it quickly. We also need to get it right. So there is a balance to be found to make sure we are getting that value for money. In response to what you've said, Jason, on pots of money, it's a point I've made before about ring fencing on some of these things on different issues. I've found, for example, money given to colleges for capital projects recently, given to West Knox, where we had some great stuff we could have done, and we got some money for something we didn't need, and we couldn't use it around. So there are examples of that, and it's something I have and will raise. Been challenging to have long-term financial planning from a government perspective, as it has been at county council level in recent years, but hopefully that improves. Councillor Foll, you reiterated many of the issues, and obviously the scope of the inquiry or committee, policy panel, or whatever you want to call it, will reflect those, and I won't preempt, but Councillor Clark's committee will make those decisions. But I am very keen for it to be properly balanced and inclusive in the way that you suggest, Councillor Zadrozny, not least because I want everybody to come out at the end of it thinking we've made the right decision, and we can all go out there as a council and trumpet the fact that we have done so, which requires everybody's involvement. So really pleased to hear that. I'm delighted Councillor Wilmot says he's got the answers, so I hope that he will feed them in. And it should be sorted very quickly. You said that, not me. So I trust that we will be able to get on with that quickly. And yes, highways to me includes the full public highway, including pavements and footpaths and everything else. And I'm sure that will be made clear in the remit of the panel. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, really positive afternoon in terms of debates and the unanimity and the atmosphere in the room. I'm so pleased that everybody is on board with the immediate priorities of this administration, and absolutely true that we need to crack on and we need to show results. So thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley, and thank you everyone for entering into the spirit of this afternoon. I think it's been a productive meeting and nobody has insulted anybody in any way. I did make an unfortunate joke at Councillor Carr's expense, but he obviously doesn't have the sense of humour that I have, but never mind. And can I ask that we wait until members of the public and press leave? Sorry? Well, sorry, Sorry, I'm rushing on. We haven't taken the vote, have we? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Anxious to get the meeting closed at 5:30. You see, that's the problem. But we have made it. In fact, we've made it a little bit earlier than 5:30. So thank you all for your attendance, and I hope that we can continue in this vein in at future meetings.